Bro, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
All right.
I think I messaged you yesterday and you agreed to come on today.
Yeah, calling me sir. I don't know why you did that. Like, you didn't
No,
why
I
me?
mean, you're a figure that everyone looks up to and admires in Nigeria. I have to say, it's like
I don't know about
when
everyone, but okay.
most people that want to see a good or a great Nigeria, because
I'd like to think
one
so.
of the ways we're gonna get there is by having journalists like yourself. So the first question I want to ask you is, who is David? Who is David Hundeyin? What forms this body of knowledge and experience and everything about you? Who are you?
Okay, so I can't answer that question without going a bit into my childhood.
Yeah.
So I'm the fourth of 5 kids. I have 3 sisters and a brother, so it's girl, boy, girl, boy, girl. The gap between the oldest and the youngest is 15 years across 2 generations. That's among us kids. So the oldest is like a Gen X, and then the rest of us are like millennials. So like older millennials to like younger millennials, and then I am just like the stereotypical middle child.
Yeah.
So the older 3, because they're sort of close to each other in age, so they always had their own little clique. And then my younger sister was like 4 years younger. She was like the last born, so she was like my parents' baby, and I was like the middle child who was just always on my own.
Yeah.
Like literally always on my own. And that was further complicated by the fact that, so my parents were Jehovah's Witnesses. And if you know a thing or two about Jehovah's Witnesses, they are not encouraged. And I'm saying this matter of understatement. They are not encouraged to associate with anyone who is not a Jehovah's Witness as well. So having friends when I was a child was a problem because I wasn't really allowed to have friends except in school, which I sort of had to hide from my parents. So I led an epic double life. Let me just put it that way. For much of my childhood, I wasn't allowed to have friends. I wasn't allowed to visit friends. I wasn't allowed to visit neighbors. Wasn't allowed to talk to girls, at least officially. I mean, I did obviously, but I mean, they weren't to know that. I wasn't allowed to have video games. We didn't even have DSTV until I was like 15 or something. So it was this sort of very, it's not fair to call it a repressive environment because the flip side that I always have to mention is that amidst all of this, these restrictions, by Nigerian standards, my family was well above upper middle class, well above that. It's not honest to describe us as upper middle class. We were rich actually by Nigerian standards. So I had access to things that I guess most other people don't have access to. So I think the most important thing, the most important formative ingredient, if you like, that sort of made me this way was the fact that because of that isolation that I described to you, all that I really had to do for close to, I don't know, when I started reading at 4 years of age, from then to when I left the house at 17, literally all I had was books and reading material. And that's the one thing we had in excess. So the family library back home, and there's no word of exaggeration here. There were no fewer than 1,000 separate books and publications
Similar to ours.
So literally nothing else to do all day than just read. And it wasn't just a certain type of reading material. It was from everything. There was religious material. There was fiction, so your Terry Pratchett's and your J.K. Rowling's and your Enid Blyton's, I had all of that. Your C.S. Lewis's, I had all of that. Like the African Writers series, so Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Usman Sembene, Bessie Head, Wole Soyinka, Chinua Achebe, had all of their titles, Cyprian Ekwensi, all them people. And then, very importantly, something my dad used to do was every single edition of every major international news magazine. So Newsweek, Time, The Economist, Reader's Digest, BBC Focus on Africa. Back when it was a print publication, we had every publication as soon as it came out. So I guess the net effect of all of this was because I simply had nothing else to do with my time until I became like an older teenager and I learned how to like sneak out of the house, and I discovered girls and all that. But before that point, literally all I had to do with my time was just read, do nothing else. So I guess you could say it made me, I wouldn't say knowledgeable, because I think that's self-praise, but I think it made me sort of more aware of the world outside.
Those formative years of yours.
Yes, exactly. And the other thing it did for me was that it helped me to understand very early on that this religion that my family was into, for lack of a more polite term, was BS, and I wanted nothing to do with it. Obviously, I couldn't come out and say that. I was living under my parents' roof, eating their food, benefiting from their tuition fees. So, I had to keep that under my hat. But I don't know, maybe since I was like 5 or 6 years old, I just knew that this is absolute total Arab bullshit. And I want not, as soon as I'm old enough to leave the house, you are not going to see me inside the Kingdom Hall anymore. However, this wasn't something I could express. So, I kept it under my hat for as long as I needed to. When I turned maybe 15 or 16, obviously things eased up a bit because I was a bit older at the time. So I started driving at 15. Funny story. I mean, I've put this out on Twitter before, so I think it's safe to say this. If you grew up in Lagos, or I don't think you grew up in Lagos.
Anambra State,
if those of us grew up in Lagos and who were on the adventurous side might have heard of a thing. Some people called it Bridge Club. Some people called it several names, but it was a thing where on environmental Saturdays. So every last Saturday of the month, there's something called environmental sanitation, and all roads are closed between 6 a.m. and I think 10 a.m. So a bunch of us boys who came from similar backgrounds would sneak out, or I would sneak out. The others weren't sneaking out because they were free to do stuff like that. Take some of their parents' cars out and go race on Terminal Bridge. So I used to do that. When I was growing up, we varied between 4 and 6 cars that we used to have in the house. But the sort of least expensive car in the house was I remember it was this 1989 Peugeot 504. So that was the car I used to sort of use to do that nonsense. Even though my parents didn't. My parents knew I was driving the car because I used to run errands for them and stuff, but they didn't know that.
The risky that.
I was doing 120 kilometers per hour on Third Mainland Bridge on Saturday morning. They didn't know that, so that was fun. And obviously, I discovered girls and whatnot. So I guess I became less intelligent. And then after I finished sort of high school, sixth form, college. Went off to university. I attended the University of Hull.
Same with me as well.
As I found out this morning. I was there from 2008 to 2011. I studied creative writing and media culture and society. So that was basically it was called a joint honors program. So what that means is you basically have 2 majors.
Similar with me, law with politics I read.
So half of the course was like a digital production program, which was handled in conjunction with the BBC because we were trained at BBC Queen's Gardens in Hull. And then the other half was like English and creative writing. So the purpose of that program was to provide a sort of practical and theoretical entry point into journalism or into media practice. So the idea I had at the time was I was going to graduate, I was going to get a job at the BBC. My girlfriend and I were going to get married. We're going to have a house, a Mini Cooper, a little, a kid and a dog that wags his tail, right? So obviously that never happened. Didn't come close to happening. Let's just anyway, like the less said about that, the better. That didn't happen. And I ended up coming back to Nigeria in 2013, completely heartbroken and ready to start a new life. So as you do, I met the person who would later become my ex-wife in NYSC camp. So I started NYSC in June 2013. I remember June 25, 2013 was the date that camp started. So it was actually a funny story. My dad was supposed to go drop me off at the camp. He was in Ekiti State. And that morning, he just decided, you know what? I don't feel like going anymore. So, get a bus instead. Like one of those cross-country buses, right? So he took me to the park at Ojota because we stayed in the Ogudiji area at the time. So he dropped me off at the park in Ojota and I got on the bus with my 2 heavy suitcases. And shortly before the bus took off, then this, this attractive young lady gets on the bus, and I could tell that she's probably going to the camp as well.
Yeah.
And as per me, we know the door. I started chatting her up, and one thing led to another, and basically that's what became a 5-year relationship, and then later marriage. That ended in 2018.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it didn't work out because, as I later came to understand, I simply got married too early, and she did as well. So it's sometimes the case that when people get married that early, they don't fully know who they are yet.
I think it depends, though.
Yeah, it doesn't happen in all cases.
I get what you mean,
some people mature earlier than others.
I get what you
but
mean.
in my case, it was certainly the case that I don't think we had fully understood who we were. Certainly who each other was at the time. So when these things started manifesting, it really became clear that this was never supposed to happen. This was a mistake.
Yeah.
So prior to that, I'm actually skipping a few points in the story. So prior to that, career-wise, so I started my career in Nigeria at Vanguard newspaper, of all places, believe it or not. There's a funny story behind that. So my dad used to be friends with the then deputy editor of Vanguard newspaper. So and one thing my dad didn't do, he did for some of his other children, but he didn't do for me, was sort of pull strings to try and get me a job. He didn't do that for me. So all he did was he just told this guy that my son is looking for a job, and he studied journalism, whatever. So this guy was like, okay, tell him to come to my office. I will test him. So I remember that day I took a what are those long buses in Lagos called? Molue.
Molue is Marwaya also.
Molue, like back when Molues were still a thing. I don't think they still exist in Lagos now, but this was 2014.
Yeah.
So I took a Molue from Oshodi to Kirikiri Canal in Apapa, where Vanguard is.
Okay.
And eventually I got to meet the editor. Then they gave me a little assignment, which they probably thought I wouldn't do well on. And then I did it in like 20 minutes, and I submitted. And the guy was like, "Did you write this?" I was like, "Yeah." He said, "You wrote it yourself."
It's not Chat GPT. That was
I was like, "Yeah, of course I wrote it myself."
Yeah,
It's like, okay. Then he gave me 2 more assignments, and he gave me a week to submit them. Something about the ACTA treaty back then. Sorry, not the ACTA treaty, the EPA treaty back in 2014. There was this thing, the Europe-Africa treaty, and then something about the election in Brazil back at the time. And I did all of it in like 48 hours.
Wow. And
it was like these 2 long, and I submitted them. And then finally they called me back. And this time the reaction was very different. They were like, you know what? We know that you are going to leave. We've seen what you've written. We've seen the quality of what you've written. Yeah. There's no point bringing you here because we know you're going to leave. So here's what we'll do for you. Then the guy picked up his phone and he made a call to a friend of his who ran a PR agency.
Okay.
So that was how I ended up starting off my career in PR instead of journalism.
Wow.
So in October 2014, I started off at an agency called Black House Media. That's BHM.
Yeah.
You might know it as BHM Group. Run by a gentleman called Ayeni Adekule. So he was my first boss.
Okay.
In Nigeria, my first substantive boss. I came in as an executive intern in October 2014. By the time I left in May 2016, I had risen to head of content. Because content was what I did. I was a good writer. I became the guy that writes everything that comes out.
Yeah.
This organization. So when I left, I had this brilliant idea that, I've done all this fantastic work. I've been behind some of the biggest PR campaigns in Nigeria, even though nobody knew who I was. Yeah. I'm the creative mind behind this, and a few people know me. So I bet I can set up my own copywriting agency, and I'd be successful, which wasn't a bad idea. But first of all, there were 2 reasons why it wasn't going to work. First, I did it because I felt peer pressure. Because a friend of mine known as I think you might know him as Big Timmy. He used to be quite a big social media personality then. He worked at BHM as well. And he had just left a couple of months before to set up his own agency called Media Panache. So basically we were working on the same account, the Nigerian Breweries account at BHM. So like Star Lager Beer, Baltina, all those brands. So he was the lead on the account and I was assisting him on the account. And then he left. And then I wasn't promoted to lead on the account. So I started putting pressure on myself that, means it's time for me to go. So he has set up his own agency, so I need to go set up mine as well. And things don't work out when you do them for those kinds of
Of
reasons.
course,
And then secondly, it was spectacularly poor timing because it was in the middle of the 2016 recession. In the recession, the first thing that suffers is marketing spend.
Yeah.
So I left BHM in May 2016. I set up my agency May 2016, and by August 2016, I was driving an Uber. I put my car on Uber.
Yeah.
Because I'd run through my savings, and it was I was a married man, I had responsibilities.
course,
you can't tell your wife stories.
Yeah,
And it wasn't just the wife. I had her little brother who was staying with us as well. So I was basically a family man. I had responsibilities. So I put my car on Uber, and I did that for 3 months. So August, September, October 2016. At the age of 26. November 2016 was when things started turning around, because I discovered that my strategy for trying to win business at the time was flawed. It was basically because what I was doing was I was pitching to these big clients because I came from BHF that works with Interswitch, Nigerian breweries, Kroll Inc., Viacom, MTN. So I was pitching to that caliber of clients as
blue chip companies.
I'm that guy that you knew from BHM. So, I'm on that level, which obviously you're not.
Yeah, of course,
So I realized eventually that you had to really sort of start from the bottom if you want to get anything on your portfolio. So believe it or not, I started off from Naira Land, of all places.
Yeah, that's still functioning to today, right?
Yeah. I started off on Land of all places. I was scanning through like the jobs and vacancy section and like the writer section, and I saw a few adverts of people who were looking for copywriters for this or for that.
Okay.
And that was where my first paying clients came from. It wasn't a lot of money.
Yeah.
It was 5,000 here, 10,000 there, but it blew my mind, the fact that I can do work right now in 2 hours and I can get paid today. And that's it. And there's no long process involved, and I don't have to pitch for 2 weeks or something. It's literally a couple of emails and that's it. And that's where I started from, really. So by January 2017, I'd gone back to paid employment, but I was still doing this on the side. So April 2017. So in February 2017, I'm skipping the story again. It's February 2017. I saw an advert, also on Ireland, funny enough, for a new TV show which was being put together by Channels Television. Right. The show didn't have a name yet. It didn't have a format yet, but it was supposed to be a political satire show. And I used to be a big fan of The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, Saturday Night Live. So I was familiar with what that format looked like. So I submitted an application. The application was basically put together a script, a comedy script. Right, with all the audiovisual inserts and everything. And fortunately, because I had that skill set, I knew how to cut videos. I already knew how to do a lot of this. So I put together a script. I sent it and I forgot about it. In April, they got back to me and they were like, "We loved your script. Do another one." So I did another one, and again, I forgot about it. June 2, 2017, they finally got back to me and they were like, "We're bringing you on. Like, the show is going to start next month, and not only are we bringing you on, you're the first writer we've hired on the show. You're the only writer we've hired on the show so far. So we want you to hire out the rest of the writing team."
Wow.
So they basically gave me that responsibility, And we talked money and everything. So at the time, it was 100,000 naira per episode, and there were 4 episodes in a month. It was 400,000 naira a month.
Wow.
To me, that was,
of course.
Of course, no day job had ever paid me that much before.
For context, though, this is a country where minimum wage is 30K.
Yeah. And bear in mind, this was 2017, where the official naira exchange rate was still like 350 thereabouts. So 400,000 naira was over $1,000 a month at the time. So that was like, wow, I didn't know that Nigerian organizations pay this much. Although the caveat I didn't mention is that the show was funded by an NGO.
Okay.
It was funded by I think OSIWA. I think that's the Open Society Institute for West Africa.
Okay.
So that was June 2, and then June 3, my dad died.
Wow.
So and he never got to see the fruition of what he paid for, basically. Because I was always the black sheep of the family. Like, everyone else in the family studied a professional program. So the first is an engineer, second is a doctor, third was a banker, last is a stockbroker, and then there's me, who said he wanted to be a writer or a journalist, whatever the hell that is. And had a very expensive education. I didn't really have much to show for it. So this was going to be that thing I was going to show them, and finally, that your investment didn't waste. And they didn't get to see it. So anyway, I stayed at channels for just over a year. That was just over 3 seasons on The Other News with Oke Bakassi, which was what the show became. And by the time that was quite successful, I got nominated for a US IVLP. That's the International Visitors Leadership Program. By the US State Department. I got nominated for that there. I was featured in the New Yorker magazine when I was there. Even I was part of a Netflix documentary that was also filmed about the show. And I was there, but nobody in Nigeria knew who I was still. And then 2019, which was the year after I left channels, I'd basically gone back to like my own copywriting thing full time. I was doing really good numbers by this time because I'd expanded to like international clients and stuff. I was doing work for international platforms. I was getting paid in dollars, so it was really good money. For me back then, I was doing between, let me not mention figures, but let's just say I was doing good money. And then in 2019, after the 2019 election, I realized that I'm actually doing solid journalistic work in American, British, European spaces, but nothing in Nigeria where I'm located physically. I can see all this, all this fuckery going on around me. I'm not sure that's a word that you're allowed to say on your podcast.
You're free,
I can see all of this going on around me, and I'm not using this voice here. Why don't I do that? So I remember my then editor, I forget what his name is, at ccn.com. I pitched him an idea that I want to do a long read, an op-ed about the Nigerian election. And he said, go for it. We don't have enough African content on this website. Let's do that. I did it, and the internet being what the internet is, even though I wrote it for an American audience, I didn't know that Nigeria had an audience for that kind of writing, like 5,000 words. I didn't know Nigerians could sit down and read 5,000 words. But the internet is a wonderful place. It went viral on Twitter for a reason I still don't understand. And at the time, I think I had like 700 followers on Twitter or something. Like nobody knew who I was. And by the end of that week, everything had just, And then I realized, wow, there's a whole like untapped market segment here for a particular style and voice of writing that simply doesn't exist in the Nigerian space. Because I think a lot of what passes for Nigerian journalism is just people trying to basically sell their patrons, basically. It's PR. Right?
It's all nonsense.
So I thought, okay, this is something, there's definitely a market opportunity here. There's a gap here. So I entered that space not as an investigative journalist, but as a columnist and like somebody who writes op-eds, editorials, that sort of thing. And then I think it was August 2019 was when like the first big break happened. So I had a cousin who used to work at Badagry General Hospital. So he had just moved to the UK. He's a doctor. And he had a few colleagues who were still at Badagry General Hospital who had like these really sad tales to tell about the place. Like doctors are performing operations without like overhead lights. They were using like their phone flashlights. The taps weren't running, so they'd have to like use a bucket and a baler to wash their hands in between patients. Patients had to pay for like their gloves and stuff. They had to reuse surgical scrubs. And then the maternal mortality rate was like 4 in 10.
Wow.
Like just absolutely atrocious situation. So, and he was like, I know you've never done this kind of story before, but you're a journalist, so I'm coming to you. So I thought, okay, this is an opportunity. And at the time, I was involved with an NGO called Rise Networks. There was an online TV station that I was head producer for. It was called The Sheet TV. It was funded by the MacArthur Foundation. So at the time, we had like a $10,000 grant or something, which we were trying to figure out what to do with. So this just presented itself. So I was like, okay, not only am I going to do a story, I'm going to do like a documentary. So because we had access to like a film crew, an editor, a bus, cameras, all that stuff. So we actually went to Badagry. We did some filming. We spoke to people. We weren't able to do the undercover filming that we wanted, but we created a documentary, and then I wrote the story and I put it out. And I think that's what changed my life, because the reaction that it got in terms of, not in terms of the reaction from people who read it, but in terms of the Lagos State Health Service Commission, like they started doing unplanned inspections, they fired a few people, and the maternal mortality rate halved.
Nice.
So I thought, wow, something I did on my laptop saved somebody's life.
This massive impact.
You know, so wow, I want to do more of this. So a couple of months after, a lady, Mercy Abang, she runs a platform called newswire.com. She reached out to me with a story, which incidentally is, I think, is the very first story in this book.
Yeah, the lady in Abuja, right?
Yes, Abuja Raid story. And she was like, she had already done a lot of the background work, but I read this and I thought, I can do more with this. So I asked her for everything she had, the materials, the recordings, access to the victims, everything she could give me. And I put it out as a sort of multi-format investigative story. When I say multi-format, I mean it's not just writing. There's visual elements, there's audiovisual elements, and everything is sort of like delivered in one, which wasn't a thing that people were doing in Nigeria at the time.
Even up to today.
Exactly. And it worked very well.
Yeah.
And in fact, it worked so well that a couple of months later, when one of the main ladies in the story, she sued the FCT ministry, and she won her case in court. And the ruling, which was delivered, I think, by Justice Binta Mutala-Nyarko, the ruling actually mentioned my story.
Wow.
So from that moment on, I knew, right, there's no going back, right? So even though at the time I was still doing copywriting work, that was still my day job. Yeah. I still do some copywriting work till today, actually. But that's when I thought, okay, I am going to shift this to the side, lower the priority of this, and face investigative journalism as my sort of main career focus right now. Even though financially it's not rewarding, because my contract with Newswire was like 20,000 naira for a story, and it was 5 stories a month. So it was like 100,000 naira a month, which was, to put that in perspective, my office, because I used to work from a private office in Oba, my office cost 70,000 naira a month. So this was really nothing.
It's not
but
gonna do anything,
I really believed in what I was doing. So 20 started, and I just sort of never looked back. And each story was bigger than the last one. Each person I took on was bigger than the last one. And I started building up this reputation as the guy who would go to the places where a Nigerian journalist is not supposed to go. You know, because there's this perception that a very damaging perception in Nigeria that a journalist is this sort of like hungry,
exactly, take envelopes, brown envelope,
bedraggled person with low self-esteem. You know,
up to today, it's still the same.
You know, but I made it a point to be, you know, the exact opposite of that. You know, which is why to today one of the most common criticisms you hear of me is, oh, he's arrogant. He's proud.
Which is what the elites say to people that they can't control.
Exactly.
They can't control you. They will brand you as...
What they really mean by he's arrogant is that he's independent.
Yeah, we can't tame him. We can't tell him what to do.
He doesn't eat out of our palms. That's what this is about. So by October 2020, I think my cup was finally full. And after the Lekki massacre, I didn't need anybody to tell me. I just knew that now it's time to leave. Because now it has got to the point where they're shooting people dead in the streets for protesting. They're going to start coming after any kind of dissenting voice. And what made it worse was, at the time, the story I was about to put out was a story that essentially implicated the government in the events of October 2020, the Lekki massacre, because the story basically included information that revealed that the internet outage that everyone suffered around the time of the massacre was a planned event, that there was sabotage that was timed to coincide with sabotage on the sort of the fiber optic cables supplying Lagos that was timed almost exactly with the massacre. So, and obviously the only people that know where these fiber optic cables are buried are the federal and state government and the networks themselves. So the networks basically said, we're not the ones, we have nothing to do with this. So that leaves
the government.
Exactly.
For context, that's the NSAS protest of October 20. That's when they, not October, it happened days before, weeks before, but 28th of October 20 was the day that Nigerian youths were murdered at the Kittle Gate. So that's the story I was talking about.
So I left basically because I knew that if I put the story out while I'm still here, they'd be looking for a reason to arrest me already. And they're going to use this as an excuse and say, who's your source? You know, when I say they'll be looking for a reason to arrest me, I'm not just saying that. I had actually been told this by a family member who himself is one of these people. I'm not going to mention his name, but he's one of those, you know, he's an Abuja person. He's a party member. He
I think we all know who he is.
I'm not talking, you know, if you're referring to
the PRO.
No, that's not him.
Okay, no, that's not him.
Okay. I come from an establishment family. My family is all over the government. They're everywhere. So this person, I'm not going to mention his name, but I'm going to mention his title. So he used to be a Deputy Controller General of Immigration.
Okay.
So he's a very well-known person. He's rich and everything. He collects contracts from Abuja. He's all that, right? And I remember in 2019, I went home to Badagry for the Salah festivities because it used to be a thing that the whole family travels home to celebrate festivities. So this person who had never said a word to me before, he looked, because he came with his convoy and everything, and me, I was just there with my little Kia Rio, and he came to look for me. And he said it with a smile on his face, but I could tell that there's real menace where this came from. And he said, we've been seeing what you've been writing, and people have been calling me. People have been calling me that. And then he touched the glasses on my face. He said, have you seen SSS headquarters in Abuja? Do you know that it goes 7 stories underground? That with these your glasses, he kept tapping my glasses. With these your glasses, you will not see anything inside there.
That's crazy, though.
And he said with a smile on his face, but I knew that that's not a joke. That's a warning.
Of course.
So when this happened, I didn't need to be told twice. I took a hint and I relocated myself.
Yeah.
So 2021, which was when I think I really started using my work almost like a blunt force weapon. I decided that, you know what, this entire, this Buhari administration specifically, and then the Nigerian system in general, I'm tired of negotiating with it. Like, I'm tired of acting as if it makes sense. It doesn't, right? And I don't want to deal with this BS anymore, right? So I'm going to be that guy who, even if there are 100 of us, if 99 of us are saying that this is an apple instead of a book, I'm going to be the guy that says that it's a book. Even if 99 people are telling me that I'm stupid. And I'm simply not going to care, right? So it almost became like a thing of like personal mission for me. Like, I don't really care what you think about me or what you think about my work or whatever personal opinions you have. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me, right? Almost like to take a box in history that there was at least one person who didn't follow the mob, right? So that's kind of like what led me down this road. So 2021, I think the most impactful stories I did in 2021, the Cornflakes for Jihad, the Boko Haram origin story.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about it, because that was the story that brought me to you.
Right.
I remember reading that story about Boko Haram, and I was. It's funny how it all came about. Cornflakes, even the title of the write-up as well. It's crazy how this organization that killed thousands of Nigerians, foreigners, I think at some point the American government had them as number 1. Even ISIS was even number 2. So Boko Haram we're talking about. And it's funny how we just came up from this kind of little thing that you talked about in your write-up. So if you don't mind, how did Boko Haram come about? Which is what you talked about in that write-up. What was the origin of Boko Haram?
So I'm just going to summarize the article really quickly. So it's important to understand, first of all, that even though that part of Nigeria, like northern Nigeria, northeastern, even some parts of northwestern Nigeria, has had issues with sort of violence, Islamic expansionism for centuries, that particular expression of the problem is a fairly recent phenomenon. I've seen it argued in several places that, well, Boko Haram is just a logical result of things that came before it, like the Uthman Danfodio Jihad. To an extent, that's correct, but it's also important to add some nuance to it, which was what I tried to do in that story. That many of us, we have parents who grew up in the North, right? And they will always tell you that the North was a very peaceful place. They felt at home there. I remember my dad, he used to tell me that he served in Sokoto State, and that at the time, the only reason he didn't stay in Sokoto State when the service year ended was that they wouldn't offer him, the government, because he wanted to be a civil servant, the government wouldn't offer him a permanent contract. That they just offered him a renewable contract. They didn't offer him a permanent employment contract, and he didn't like that. That's the only reason he went back to Lagos, because there was a teacher in Sokoto and he was perfectly fine. He had no problem. He was a Christian, he was a Jehovah's Witness, but he didn't have a problem. It was just that peaceful a place that even though they are all Muslims and he's a Christian, they didn't have a problem with him. He didn't have a problem with them. He wanted to stay there for the rest of his life, right? So I think a lot of our parents have such experiences. And then they will always say that something changed. And then they could never really pinpoint what it was or when. But somewhere between the 80s and the 90s, something shifted, and they don't really know what it was. And all of a sudden, the place just became what it is today. So what I tried to do in that story was to actually, for the first time, properly trace through that sequence of events. That this is what happened. This is who was responsible for it. So the key figures, not the people like Abubakar Shekau and Mohammed Yusuf.
Those are he's dead now, leader of Boko Haram.
Yeah, those are the people. Those are the names we hear most often. That's the very story I used to hear. Between 2009 and 2015, 16 was Mohammed Yusuf basically led a band of extremists who were just basically politically expedient. They're politically useful to the Borno state government at the time. And then as soon as they were no longer politically useful, the Borno state government basically got rid of them. The police did what they did. They shot the guy, they left his body on display, and then that radicalized his followers. And then it's it almost sounds like an unfortunate accident. Whereas that's actually not the case at all, right? This was actually a very well planned, very well coordinated series of events that predated Mohammed Yusuf's rise to prominence. So the role that Saudi financing played, and the fact that this wasn't something that was unique to Nigeria, this was a thing back then that the Saudi state at the time, its method of building foreign influence was basically funding the expansion of Wahhabism across the world, right? And Nigeria was just one of those places. So the funding of the Muslim, what was it called? The Muslim World League, which was basically a Wahhabi ambassadorial outpost. And the amount of money that was pumped into Nigeria from that thing, and the support it gave, doctrinal and political support that it provided to clerics that were embedded within the so-called Izala Society at the time. And the fact that even though the Izala Society officially is not Nigeria's umbrella Muslim body, but it became de facto Nigeria's most powerful Muslim body, and this was how it happened. This was who funded it, and this was why. So that's how come in 1979, when the thing we now know as the Izala movement or the Izala sect, when it's crystallized into that thing, when it was given that name by Sheikh Ismaila Idris, that is how come from 1979 things started changing. Because our parents would always say between the 80s and the 90s something changed. They don't know what and why. This is what and why. So it was in 1979 that something changed. Prior to all of this, Sheikh Abubakar Mahmoud Gumi met a version of Islam on the ground, which was fairly benign, right? The Sufi and the Qadiriya sects in northern Nigeria, they had their issues, but they were not really expansionists, right? They were not violent expansionists. They had found a way. I think this is a very crucial point. They had found a way to syncretize Islam with their local customs and traditions. According to sort of religious purists, syncretism is some sort of like, it's blasphemy, it's wrong, you're not supposed to mix different religions. But the reality of, and I'm not saying this as an atheist, I'm saying this from the point of view of just a sociologist, a historian, is when religions, foreign religions, find ways to syncretize with local customs and traditions, that's when they are less likely to be violent and dangerous. So that's how come, for example, the type of Islam which is practiced in southwestern Nigeria is not expansionist, because it has a high level of syncretism with African traditional religion. So you have a phenomena like the Alpha, for example. That's not really an Islamic thing, but it is in southwestern Nigeria, right? Because the Alpha is basically a syncretism of Babalawo and an Islamic preacher, right? So that's how come it's not going to fight its neighbors, because it has become part of that local ecosystem. The same thing with Christianity in Nigeria. It has achieved syncretism. So the Aladura people, for example, that, they are very complex set of rituals and stuff. That is a syncretism of Ifa, African traditional religion, with Christianity. And that's why those guys are not violent expansionists. However, what Sheikh Abubakar Mahmoud Gumi imported from Saudi Arabia, and with active ongoing help from the Saudis at the time, was religious purism, religious extremism in a way, because it insisted that any form of Islam apart from this one wasn't valid, and that any form of Islam that incorporated any sort of customs or tradition or practices that wasn't expressly stated in the Quran or in the Hadith, is that those people are as good as unbelievers, basically. So once you start categorizing people as, true Muslims and unbelievers, you are creating,
Of course.
they are laying the groundwork for violence, which is exactly what started to happen eventually. What that story set out to achieve, to inform the audience about, was that you always hear about how, there's people who fund Boko Haram. These people are not, demons in the sky. These are real people that you may not have heard of, but they exist. These are their names. So you saw names like, obviously you saw the Sheikh Mahmoud Gumi, Sheikh Ismaila Idris, Yahya Jingir. You also saw the names of the money launderers who were involved with these people. Some of these guys who got very angry that their names were mentioned. So, like, for example, Ahmed Idris Nasruddin, the founder of a NASCO group.
The
late founder.
Nabisco, is it NASCO? Okay,
NASCO,
that's sorry, that's okay.
The late founder of NASCO group. The company and his family, got very angry about the fact that they were mentioned. But the thing is, this story is not just making an allegation, right? There are U.S. State Department documents backing this
evidence,
up, right? There's so much evidence that simply, and again, the reason why I thought it was very important to do this story was, and I've said this in several places, at the time when these things were happening, there was no internet in Nigeria. It's for the same reason why somebody will get a conviction for heroin trafficking in 1992 in Chicago, and then will be able to run for elective office less than a decade later in Nigeria.
We'll come to that later.
Because there was no internet. So there was no way to share information instantly in real time. So there was this sort of asymmetry of information at the time. So the fact that the founder of NASCO Group was designated by the U.S. State Department as a terror funder, and then the Treasury Department, not the State Department, and that they published a very sort of detailed breakdown of exactly how this person funded this terror group, the institutions through which he laundered this money, and the fact that NASCO itself, that the U.S. government itself considered leaning on the Nigerian government to basically designate NASCO itself as a terror financing entity, and that the Nigerian government itself seized NASCO from this guy for a while, because the Nigerian government itself, according to its own documents, the Nigerian government itself designated this entire business entity as a funder of terrorists, right? And then a couple of years later, after there were some asset forfeitures and he struck some kind of deal, the State Department, to the obvious displeasure of even people like the former State Department staffer, Victor Comras, who later came out to the LA Times an interview and said, I don't know why we let this guy go, because he worked on that case. Obviously, this guy struck a deal like all rich men do, and he was able to sort of get himself off the hook, right? Even though the people who were designated alongside him weren't able to get off the hook. And all of this information is sort of has been hiding in plain sight for years. It's been on, UN document repositories. It's been in public records, but people simply don't even know that this information exists, much less how to find it. So I think part of my job as a journalist in an environment like Nigeria, where there has been historically this asymmetry of information, people don't know what they don't know, is to not just bring out the information, but also show people where the source is.
And also, I was gonna leading on from that. Why is it that we don't have more people like yourself? Because I think that's one of the issues we have in Nigeria, and that's one of the difficulties and the challenges that we need to overcome if we're gonna have a better Nigeria. We need people like yourself that are gonna go out there, find this information, and show the public this information. But in Nigeria, we don't have that. Like we were saying earlier, journalists that we have in Nigeria, people that just want to talk for their patrons, their masters. Anything the master says will write. We're not going to say anything to offend you or to... Which that's your job as a journalist. Your job is to comfort, like someone said, comfort the afflicted and afflict the comforted. Something of that nature, right? And that's your job. Your job is to make them uncomfortable. Your job is to speak
Hold
truth to power.
accountable.
Exactly. But we don't have that. So why is it that in Nigeria we find it difficult? And that's why you stand out up to today. Everyone is talking about David, because And you struck fear in their hearts because they know that when it comes to David, there is no compromise. You're there to speak through to power. But why don't we have more people like yourself doing? Because to make sense to have 100 Davids doing what you're doing.
Ideally, yeah. But the thing is, so there, in my opinion, there are two major reasons why that hasn't been the case and why that might not still be the case for a while. The first is I'm trying to figure out a way to say this without unintentionally creating a lynch mob to come after me.
Anyhow, honestly,
so I'm going to say this in very sort of couched language, but due to the activities of Abacha and Babangida in particular during the military era, where these two men terrorized the media. They made journalists run into exile. They sent a parcel bomb to Dele Giwa, which exploded and killed him and injured his colleagues. They used to invade newsrooms, pointing guns at journalists and editors. They used to abduct them. So I think over the course of the 80s and the 90s, these two men specifically, or three actually, because I'm going to include Buhari there, Buhari, Babangida, and Abacha, those three men destroyed any sort of pride or desire to work in the field of journalism in Nigeria. Under those three men, journalism in the real sense of it became a sort of how do I put it, endangered activity. So the net effect of that was, previously it used to be the case that when people are writing their JAM exam, they want to go to university. You know how it is in Nigeria, everybody wants to study law or engineering, medicine, that sort of thing. The gateway course into journalism, which used to be known as mass comm, I hear they've split it up now, which is a good thing, but it used to be known as mass comm. Back then, mass comm was also right there at the top. So the brightest kids in the class wanted to study mass comm, just like they wanted to study medicine and engineering and stuff. If you said you wanted to be a journalist in the 70s, it was like saying you want to be an oil worker now. Or you want to be, you understand?
There was pride.
There was real pride in it. But under those three men and the damage that the military did to media and journalistic practice in Nigeria, it became the case that parents started telling their children, no, please, go and do law, go and do engineering. Don't, because, and it was a rational decision to make, because why would you send your child whom you carried in your belly for 9 months, you've suffered to educate and take care of for 18 years, why would you then deliver them to the mouth of the Nigerian military? So people like, what's his name now? Colonel Franco Menka, or Halilu Akilu, who will go and torture them because they wrote a story that Oga did not like. You understand? So the brightest people in the class, basically, the people at the front of the class, started staying away from Masscom. And as a result, Masscom started getting the people from the back of the class. So a lot of the people you will find in journalism, particularly working in the print media, particularly, this also happens in the broadcast and online space, but particularly in the print media, a lot of the people you find in that space are people who, for lack of a better expression, are not the brightest, are not the sharpest tools in the box, right? They entered Masscom because they thought that that's what I can get. You understand? I'm not smart enough to get into XYZ, so let me just try for Masscom. Or I tried for XYZ and Masscom was my backup option. So Masscom is the one I was able to get. So they sort of entered into journalism by default. They don't really want to be there.
Passion, no desire.
They don't really have any pride or passion for the job. They are just there because that's what they could get. So there's that. And then the second reason, and possibly even the more important reason, is that financially, there's no business model for people like me. So I said it a few minutes ago that up till now, I still subsidize my work with the stuff I do on the side. I still do my copywriting work. I always tell people I still have a 9 to 5. Strictly speaking, it's not a 9 to 5, but I still do copywriting work that basically pays my bills. So my publication, for example, West Africa Weekly, I have 46,000 subscribers. Out of those 46,000 total subscribers, how many of them do you think are paying subscribers?
Very few.
I'm asking you. Just give me a guess. So
5,000?
First of all, that let me sort of contextualize that. So I used to be on a program called Substack Local.
You're no longer Substack now.
No, I'm on.
You're still,
So there was a funding program called Substack Local, where 12 writers and journalists from around the world on Substack were selected to be funded for a year to see how big their platforms could grow and whatnot. Okay. So that was actually when I first started my Substack. So I was the only person from Africa who was selected. Wow. Right. So there were Americans, there were Australians, there were Europeans, there was a Brazilian. The Americans were like $75,000 a year each that they were getting. They paid me $30,000 because Africa. You know how it is. So at the end of the program, we had like this meeting with Hamish, who is the founder of Substack. Right. We had this meeting where we had like a really big progress report, and we all sort of put out our numbers. And so in terms of subscriber acquisition, I was number one by far and away. I was like around 40,000, and the person who was coming second had about 12,000. Wow. So the gap was huge. Most people had between 3,000 and 5,000. But here's the thing. The people who had 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 total subscribers, their monetization rate, that's the total percentage of their subscribers who were paying, was between 20 and 50%. Wow. So you have a lady who has 5,000 subscribers, 50% of them are paying. Exactly. That's 2,500 subscribers paying $10 a month.
It's constant.
So before tax, this person is banking $25,000 a month. So why won't she be able to do any kind of journalism that
take your time, do your stuff?
In my case, I had by far and away the highest number of 40-something thousand subscribers. How many of my subscribers were paying?
1,000?
At the time, and 200.
Wow, less than 200 people are paying.
Yes.
Whoa, you can't even.
As we speak now, it's not up to 300 yet.
Oh no.
I have 46,000 subscribers, and less than 300 of them are paying.
Oh no. Hopefully from this podcast, hopefully people are gonna, because I think what I think Nigerians have to understand is this drive for better Nigeria is not gonna come by just talking online or Twitter, or it's also by supporting people like yourself. When you see someone that is doing something that people are scared to do, someone that is risking their lives, putting their lives on the line, saying things that people don't want to say, it only makes sense to say, you know what, let's support, let's help out. This is the little thing that we can do. Maybe you're in Germany, maybe you're in France, maybe you're in Singapore, Switzerland, even Ghana, any place you are, and you see David's work, you're like, you know what, I need to at least be doing maybe £10 a month. I think it's something. I think it's going a long way. So because we need more, because that would encourage the next David or the next Samuel.
It definitely would. But it's also important to remember, like everything you said is true. But having said that, it's also important to qualify it that Nigeria is, well, up until recently anyway, was the world's poverty capital.
That was why I didn't say Nigeria. I said all these other places because I didn't mention. I can understand that.
But the problem is the vast majority of that subscriber list is made up of Nigerians living in Nigeria,
which is good.
Great. It's a good thing. It's also, when it comes to monetization, it's also a terrible thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Because most of them simply cannot afford.
Exactly.
And even who can afford it, there's also the issue of Godwin Emefiele, who has made it impossible for them to use their Nigerian cards to make any payment in US dollars. So a lot of it is not really their fault.
And that's why I didn't because the reason why I didn't mention that was because, to say this, those abroad, they were trying to finance obese campaign at some point.
Yes, and they did to an extent.
That was massive. Thumbs up. That's great. But you also have to finance journalists as well. You also have to finance people like yourself.
And this is the issue. The issue I have tried to raise since 2020, that people need to understand that the democratic process is not about elections alone.
So many things need to come before that. So many things are going to happen before that. Exactly.
Democracy and having elections are not the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You can be a dictatorship and still hold elections. Abacha was about to hold elections before he died, and he was the sole candidate in the election.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not about election is coming. Oh,
look at Russia, look at China, look at that. They still hold elections.
Yeah. China holds elections. Russia holds elections.
Exactly.
North Korea holds elections.
Exactly.
The fact of holding an election is not all there is to democracy. Democracy doesn't mean a system of government where you hold elections. No, democracy means government of the people, for the people, by the people. Yeah. For those three elements to come into play, there needs to be a constant watchdog. Constantly patrolling and constantly, as you said, comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable.
100%.
That's how it has to be.
100%.
But I feel as if a lot of people genuinely do not understand why journalism is important. or they generally don't see the value in journalism. I feel as if, and I really understood this was when this book was released, right? So I put this book out, and every time I had a speaking engagement, or I would like post an Amazon link or Roving Heights link, it would sell out. People bought this book.
Exactly. Yeah, true.
And it blew my mind, because I realized that when people felt as if there's a product in their hand, they were willing to spend their £20.
Yeah.
But when it's an article on the internet, which is sort of offered to you almost like basically for free, then it's like, oh, why should I pay for it? Yeah. Meanwhile, in terms of the personal cost to me, this book didn't cost me anything to publish, because the publisher was the one who bore the cost. In fact, I got paid for it. Those stories, those are the stories that they take a huge toll on me, both in terms of time, the efforts, even the emotional impact on me, and then the financial implications as well, because these things are not cheap to source. So if you are going to court in the US, for example, you're taking the IRS and the FBI and the DEA to court, that I need these records to be unsealed. I've sent you an FOIA. There's no reason why you should not agree to my FOIA, so I'm taking it to court. All those filing processes, hiring lawyers, interfacing with this, all these things cost real money. Of course, right? And it's only after doing all of that one can actually present to you high quality journalism. Exactly. If someone doesn't do that, all they can present to you is, I reached out to so and so person and they said, which in my opinion, that's not journalism. Of course, because a lot of what people call journalism in Nigeria is a coconut fell and hit a man on the head and the man died, right? Yeah. Now, you could go and look for a CCTV camera footage of the incident. Yeah. And then maybe the person who has the camera footage will tell you they are not releasing it to you. And then you have to go through a legal process to get hold of it because you believe it's in public interest. Or you can go and get a statement from the building security who will tell you that no such thing happened and the man had a heart attack. Yeah. And then you publish that statement and say you've done your work. That's journalism. Yeah. And then if somebody now later comes and says, no, that's not true. Yeah. And that's not really what happened. You then say, but this is a statement I got from them. Yeah. And I've come across it several times in the course of my own career. I've come across several times where people will say, so I'll give you a practical example. Last year, January last year, when the ban on Twitter was lifted, and I remember at the time there was this narrative that the federal government was trying to push, that they've reached some kind of agreement with Twitter, that Twitter is going to give them back-end access, that Twitter is going to let them moderate what people can, all that kind of nonsense. Twitter is going to set up shop in Nigeria and pay tax in Nigeria. All these pie in the sky things that were clearly not true. Of course. And a guy, I'm not going to mention his name, it's not worth mentioning, but a guy who works at BBC Africa went and published a story on BBC that the BBC understands that the federal government has blah, 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 blah. And I challenged this dude on Twitter, like, what the hell do you mean by this? How is any of this true? How can you prove any of this? Like, and then like a source wasn't even cited. It's just the BBC understands that. Who gave you this information? So clearly what happened is, and when I challenged him, what he basically said was, so if you don't like the way I did it, you can also send an email to Twitter. And then they will so basically what he said was that he sent an email to Twitter. Yeah. And the official response that he got was what he vomited onto the page. And that's journalism. That's not, Meanwhile, a few months later, or a few months ago, when the so-called Twitter files came out, after Elon Musk took over Twitter, it was stated there very clearly. One of the things that was noted was that Twitter basically lied by omission, by allowing the federal government to lie that they had any kind of interaction with Twitter. There was no such thing. Of course not, They're not going to do that. Just allow them to claim victory and then move on. Exactly. But the point is, as a journalist, I think your job should have been to establish that from the get-go.
Look behind the mirror. What's going on? What's going on?
I'll give you another example. Last year, when there was a bit of controversy going around about whether Bola Tinubu actually attended Chicago State University. So what most people who call themselves journalists in Nigeria went and did was they ran and they found and they Googled Chicago State University email. And then they found an email address that goes to the registrar's office, and then they sent an email. My name is so-and-so from so-and-so newspaper. I'm calling to I'm sending message to confirm whether someone by the name of Bola Ahmed Tinubu attended your institution, blah, 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 blah. And then they got a response from the university. I can confirm that Bola Ahmed Tinubu, blah, 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 blah. And then they came to it. Yes, we have done journalism. That's our job.
Yeah.
What I did, I was working with a lawyer, so I can't take all the credit on this one.
Yeah.
But in partnership with the lawyer I was working with, we instead went through a Chicago law firm, Leahy, Eisenberg, and Frankel. We served a subpoena to Chicago State University. Because I basically suspect that these people are lying.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So we served them a subpoena, and a subpoena is very different from sending an email. Because if someone sends you an email, you can tell a lie in response. If someone sends you a subpoena, you cannot lie because to do so will be committing perjury.
Yeah, you come under oath, yeah.
So then they had to give us what it was that they actually had, the actual certificate, which is issued to the person known as Bola A. Tinubu. And that certificate had nothing to do with what it was that it claimed was a certificate that is submitted to INEC.
Yeah.
So clearly he lied. And that's the thing. That's what I mean when I say that a lot of people who think they're doing journalism in Nigeria are actually just doing PR and they don't realize it.
No, I agree. And that's why I hope that this podcast and many other things we're going to be talking about is going to help to shine a light on the need for Nigerians to support your work. And maybe, hopefully, there are going to be other individuals that are going to come out along the way, that are going to do brilliant work, and we need to also support them. But speaking about Tinubu, what do you think of Tinubu? Tinubu is going to be, in my opinion, let me just say this to clear my chest.
What do I think of Tinubu? What a question, Noble. What a question.
Let me say this to clear my chest, right? I think Tinubu is going to be inaugurated come May 29th. I think he will be our president. I don't think the court case that Peter B is bringing, or the PDP, I don't think it will have any effect at all. Like we were saying off air in the cafe, I think the mistake that many obedience are making is they are mistaking the enemy who was, what's his name, Minister of Labour, Ngige.
Right.
They are mistaking Ngige for Tinubu. Yes, P2B took Ngige to court and won. That's fine. Chris Ngige is a different ball game. The enemy, Chris Ngige, was easy to defeat. You could defeat Ngige. That's state level politics. That's easy. And let's not forget, P2B was able to win Ngige because he had PDP on his side. He had the Oba family, Chris Oba and Eseloga, on his side. Oba family are known in Anambra. I'm from Anambra, so I know this very well. They are one of the godfathers, and they hold power. They were quite powerful back then, right? So with the help of the Oba family, who were against Ngige, because they had a deal with Ngige that you're gonna give us power after the stuff that goes on in Nigeria politics, right? But what happened was, with the help of the Oba family, Peter was able to win. But the mistake we're making now is, and this is why I always say, you must know the enemy. You must understand the enemy. If you're gonna win, you have to know who you're fighting against. The mistake the Obedience are making is to think that Ngige is Tinubu. Tinubu is a different ballgame altogether. The level that Tinubu is at, these are different levels. So to think that Tinubu is gonna allow P2B to win, I think is maybe we don't know Nigeria. We don't know the country we are living in.
I don't think it's an issue of Tinubu allowing Peter Obi to win. Tinubu is not the judiciary.
No, you get my point. I think you understand what I'm saying. I don't mean that of course the judiciary they are there, but we all know the kind of country
that we know
it
has possibly has a lot of unstated influence over the judiciary. That is a fact.
Yeah,
however, as I also mentioned to you in the car on the way here, I refuse to speak about this in the past tense. So as far as I'm concerned, there's an ongoing legal process going on. The process has barely even begun.
Just 2 days ago, yesterday began.
And as I've mentioned in several places, the APC has no case. And they know they have no case, none whatsoever. I'm so confident in the fact that they have no case that if it was, if there were no possibility of them dragging this out to the 29th and then trying to get him sworn in so he can use presidential power to scatter this thing, if that wasn't a possibility, I would be confident enough to represent one of these petitioners in court as a complete legal lay person. I would win the case because the APC has no case. They have none whatsoever. However, the issue is that because there is a possibility that they will have a way to drag this thing out to May 29th. And then if this person is actually sworn in, that creates all kinds of constitutional jeopardy. Right. Personally, if I were Tinubu, I would see that the goal of being sworn in on May 29 in itself doesn't solve my problems. If I were Tinubu, I would never have run for president to start with, because I would have understood that for someone with my kind of record, Tinubu is not the first criminal to get involved in politics. Right? Criminals get involved in politics all the time, all over the world, including here in the UK. It happens. However, they are always smart enough to stay in the background.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Right? They are always the godfathers who stay in the background. They never come to the front, put their faces out there, and say Emilio Khan. They're usually not that stupid.
Yeah.
However, well, Nigeria being what Nigeria is, here we are. I think that if Tinubu were a smart person, he would have understood that the sheer amount of chaos, the sheer amount of constitutional jeopardy, the sheer amount of potential, what's the term I'm looking for now? There's a particular term I'm looking for. But the problems that he would face if he's actually sworn in, despite being widely understood to be an illegitimate president who had no chance of winning the tribunal if he didn't use presidential power to try and scatter it. What that would mean is that he's not going to be able to run a government in any appreciable sense.
Why do you say so? Why?
So I was at Chatham House yesterday. Okay. I had a private session with the head of the Sierra Leonean opposition party. Ironically enough, the Sierra Leonean opposition party is called the APC, the All People's Congress. Okay. That's what it's called in Sierra Leone.
Yeah.
So the head of the opposition, Dr. Sumara Kamara, we had a session with him yesterday at Chatham House, and there was something he said that stuck in my mind. He said that as a leader, and he made this comment in reference to the current president, Julius Maada Bio in Sierra Leone. And he said the reason Julius Maada Bio has failed as president of Sierra Leone is not necessarily because he's a bad person, or it's not necessarily because he had bad intentions of coming to office, but it's because when he came into office, he came with the mindset of discrediting his predecessor and fighting everybody. So when you come into office with the sole aim of showing everybody that it is you that has power now, and you have won. You've been trying to get this office for years, and now you have won. Now it's your turn. So everybody that came before you has to suffer. So you now leave the business of governance to start playing
revenge politics.
Revenge politics and games. You start proving everything probable. You start playing all these games. That the truth is that time is going by. The country is not moving forward.
Of course,
you're wasting everybody's energy on your personal vendetta. And eventually 4 years, 5 years have passed. The country is worse off than when you took it, and then you start looking for scapegoats. So drawing from that, what Tinubu is going to find out is if he's actually sworn in. First of all, assuming his health will even permit him to even assume that presidency, which is a very big if, right? Even assuming that is the case, he's going to realize very quickly that in order to govern a country like Nigeria, it's not enough to just have the stick in your hand that tells you that you are president and GCFR. Being the leader of Nigeria, a country as big as Nigeria, because I don't think they appreciate just how big Nigeria is. Nigeria is not Lagos. Nigeria is not the Southwest.
It's a lot.
Nigeria is a country which is so big that it cannot functionally police its own borders.
Exactly. True.
Nigeria is a country that is so big that we don't know how many Nigerians exist.
True.
We last had something approaching a census. It wasn't credible, but something like a census in 2006.
It's a long time ago.
17 years ago. Nigeria is a country that is so big. I think of all the countries in the world, including China and India, we have the third largest concentration of languages. 500 and something languages. Choked into 900 and something thousand square kilometers of land. When you want to lead a country that is that diverse, that is that contradictory, that is that divided, what you need more than anything else is broad consensus.
But right? Isn't that assuming that that's what he wants to do?
But
they don't care.
But the problem is that whether you care or you don't. So using Buhari as an example, even though people often, and I always used to say that Buhari came and had no intention of unifying the country. He was just a bigot. But the truth is that even Buhari had some sort of broad-based appeal. In the first place, that election in 2015, Buhari actually won it. He actually won the election
No,
legitimately.
of course he did, yeah.
He actually did.
Yeah.
And I always use my peer group as a barometer of public opinion. And I could tell, even though I supported Jonathan in 2015, my entire peer group was openly supporting this man, whom they had nothing in common with. They had nothing in common with him religiously, ethnically, intellectually. They had like chalk and cheese, you understand?
Yeah.
But everyone supported Buhari in 2015.
Yeah.
Like, I think personally that they all made a mistake, but the truth is that they all supported him in 2015. So when he came in 2015, regardless of whatever intentions he had, there was at least a certain amount of goodwill that came with him. There was at least a honeymoon period that people allowed him for like 6 months.
Yeah.
I don't criticize this guy yet. Let's see what he wants to do. Even though from like the first week, I could tell that this person is going to be a disaster.
Of course,
In the case of Tinubu, from the day before day zero, everybody already knows, first of all, you did not win that election. Right? You played whatever games you were able to play in the background, and you got them to declare you at 4 a.m. As the winner of an election that you categorically did not win. Everybody knows this, right? You even lost in Lagos, for goodness sake. Like, Lagos, which is your crown jewel, and the place where your rigging machinery is at its strongest. The way you were beaten in Lagos was so impossible to hide that even according to your official figures that you allowed them to put out, you lost Lagos. So you cannot tell me that you won an election and come on. Everybody knows he did not win that election. So number one, there's that lack of goodwill. Because everybody knows this is an illegitimate president. You stole that result. Yeah. You did not win it. That was 8 million votes you said you did not get 8 million votes. Nobody gave you that 8 million votes, first of all. Secondly, and this is a follow-on from the first point, that lack of goodwill means that the only other way for you to functionally be able to create a government is for there to be enough elite consensus from around the country for people to be able to at least get over their grievances and hold their noses and deal with you. You remember in the car on the way here, I mentioned Obasanjo in 2003. Yeah. That it's believed that Obasanjo did not win that election in 2003. Yeah. However, the Morris Iwu iteration of INEC at the time did what it did. Yeah. A result was announced, and that was that. Regardless of whether Obasanjo won that election or not, the fact is that just by virtue of being the person that he was, Obasanjo was able to inspire enough elite consensus from around the country that even the places where they did not vote for him and they feel like he did not win the election, the elites there were still able to pacify those people and say, you know what, let's chill for another 4 years. Let's work with this guy. Tinubu does not have that skill set. Tinubu is not a diplomat. Tinubu is not a statesman. Tinubu does not. All Tinubu knows is the rules of the streets. And the rules of the streets, I would recommend anybody watching this to go watch the movie Gangs of Lagos. Because as I said when I watched it, that wasn't a movie, that was a documentary. If you want to understand Nigerian politics, watch that movie. That was a documentary. Why I call it a documentary was it outlined the sort of the psyche behind politics in Nigeria. That there is no wider thought of strategy. There's no wider desire to achieve something great. No. All of it is just mad scramble. Of course, for and money, for to power. Be the last man standing exactly. Through any means necessary. So if I have to kill you, kill your family, and step on top of your head. And the only purpose of all of this is so that I can be the head nigger in charge. That's all. Nothing more than that. Right? That is exactly how Tinubu is. Right, and I always say this whenever people say, "Oh, this man is a kind of like master strategist," he has political sagacity, and I always burst out laughing because this was someone who, my dad used to work with him, so as a child, I had access to these people, right? And you hear the way they talk, you hear the things they say. These people are so fundamentally limited. Intellectually, there is no. The only reason why they are where they are is because of money and violence. It's nothing more.
Yeah, but the thing is, money and violence is also part of strategy.
But here's the
It doesn't
thing.
need to be good. It doesn't need to be moral.
No matter how
or
much,
nice,
no matter
right?
how much money and violence you have from your base.
I'm not saying it's good though. My point is, it's still part of strategy as well.
No matter how much money and violence you have from your base in Lagos, it's not enough to conquer the whole of Nigeria. It's not enough. Buhari, as brutal as he was, did not rule Nigeria with just tyranny alone. It wasn't just violence alone or just bribing anybody. No. He still genuinely had a support base in many places. People, at least in the north, in many places, still genuinely loved him. Till now, I can tell you for a fact, if an election is held in Nigeria now and Buhari is on the ballot, Buhari will still win millions of votes till today. Because he actually had that organic support base.
Don't you think the Yoruba support Tinubu then? Don't you think?
No, I don't. I believe again, it boils down to money and violence. The supposed Yoruba support for Tinubu boils down to one of those two things. Either those who, hilariously believe that they will be part of the chosen few, they'll be part of his group, they will benefit something from him, or that someone close to him will benefit them, or the ones who basically have been sort of conditioned into thinking that somehow this is a fight against another ethnicity. And this is a fight to defend your ethnic pride, which still boils down to violence. So it's money and it's violence and there's nothing else. There is no, so the way Obafemi Awolowo inspired a following, the way I can sit I can sit down and read a book about Obafemi Awolowo. Right? If someone writes a book about Obafemi Awolowo, I will buy it and I will read it. Because even though I wasn't around when he was playing his politics, but you could say that the positive effects of the things that Obafemi Awolowo did,
of course,
I experienced them in my own life.
Of course.
So my dad, for example, the reason he got to attend primary and secondary school was because of free education in the Western region. And the reason that is so significant is that Obafemi Awolowo was a Yoruba man. He could have tried to run his premiership of the Western region as a sort of Yoruba ethnic thing. He could have done that, and Badagry, which is not a Yoruba town, could have been marginalized. He didn't do that. So my dad, who grew up in Badagry, had access to the same things that a child growing up in Surulere or in Oshogbo had. There was no, so in fact, I was telling someone earlier this month, that's part of the reason why our native language in Badagry is even dying, because most people have become acculturated into the Yoruba ethnicity. Not because they were forced, but because, what else would you do? Like, Obafemi Awolowo just made it so easy for you to assimilate into that ethnic group using a carrot instead of a stick. So if someone gives me a book to read about Obafemi Awolowo, I will sit down and read it because I'll know there's something worth taking away from that book. If you give me a book to read about Bola, what is there inside it that will make me read it? What is there? So the idea of Tinubu in office and occupying the seat as president of Nigeria, every time I think about it, I can't decide whether I want to cry or I want to burst out laughing. The idea is ridiculous to me. He doesn't have it in him. And in any case, even if it does happen, you can quote me on this, I don't care. Even if it does happen, the probability, because we're in March 2023 now, the probability that he makes it to December 2024, still breathing oxygen on this planet, is about 0. So, good luck to him.
That's a powerful statement there. But the thing is, when it comes to Tinubu, and we talked about this again off air, when it comes to these guys, right? And we're talking about the last election now. I don't know if, and maybe you have more evidence and proof to this, right? I don't know if P2B, because there's a difference between saying the election was rigged. We all know the election was rigged. It's obvious. What we saw on social media, the violence, the rigging, what you saw Solomon saying, what you saw happening even in Rivers State. For APC to win Rivers, it's like saying that APC won Anambra State. It's not possible. There is no planet Earth that APC wins Rivers State. It's not possible. So it's obvious that Wike put his hand on the scale for Tinubu, for APC. Obviously, he has beef against Atiku, right? And so APC won Rivers, which there is no planet that APC can win Rivers States. PDP should have won Rivers, or even LP, we agree. But for APC, no. So I agree with you, rigging happened. But did that rigging, was it to the extent or to the point that we can say authoritatively that this election was lost by Tinubu, and that the rigging was to the extent that P2B won the election and not Tinubu.
Well, yeah, and it's not just us saying it. There's actual data to prove it. So, and I'll explain what I mean by this. Now, prior to the election, what we were told, which I'm made to understand now, wasn't true at all. What we were told was that there's this thing called the BVAS, and that what it does is that it accredits voters, and then it uploads the result sheets, the EC8 form to the IREV server
Portal, yeah.
and that the IREV, what is uploaded to the IREV server, becomes the basis for the collation of results, becomes the basis for the results that are announced. And actually, that is not true at all. That actually all the BVAS does is that it accredits voters and it uploads result sheets to the IREV portal. But that what is actually used to announce the results of the election are the EC20 sheets, which are compiled at the collation center. So the only business that the IRF has with the collation center is that the total number of accredited voters on every EC8 result sheet, according to the IRF, must tally with the total number of accredited voters that is recorded on the EC20. So if you recall all those EC8 sheets we saw on social media the days after the election, where you see maybe LP had 1,000 votes, APC had 300, and then they will cancel, they remove 200. They'll cancel 10 from the LP 1,000, making it 100, and they add 900 to the APC's 300, making it 1,200. You understand that kind of thing? The reason that was done in such a crude way was that the total number of accredited voters at the bottom doesn't change. So no matter how much TPEX and obvious
irregularities,
obvious, what's the word I'm looking for?
Mago irregularities.
Lord, I can't believe I like English of all things. I mean, I have a degree in English. This shouldn't be this hard. All the edits and the that have been made on that paper, and it's very obvious. Regardless of all of that, the collation officer, the only thing that he's interested in is the number at the bottom, accredited voters. So if you like, you can write total LP, SEMO, APC, EBA. It doesn't matter. As long as the total number of accredited voters at the bottom tallies with that on his EC20, he'll record it as a result. Whatever it is that is given to him, he'll record as a result. In other words, the election obviously was won by the LP at the polling units, but at the collation centers,
which is where it matters.
That is where all this mago, as you put it, happened. Now, the reason that is such a big point is that what a lot of us thought, including me, because that's the impression INEC gave us, which was a lie. The impression we were given was that middleman risk at the collation center had been cut out using the BVAS. That this thing called electronic transmission of results means that when results goes to the INEC server, that it's from there that is tabulated. No. The results that go on the IREV are not what is tabulated into the result that is announced. So basically, that's how you see on the IREV portal, for example, it shows very clearly that Peter Obi won Rivers State, the LP won Rivers State. However, according to INEC's official announcement, APC won Rivers State. So the question is then, what happens when INEC's own data, which is on its IREV, contradicts the results INEC announces? And the answer is go to court. So what I can see from all of this was that some of us, including me, even made a mistake in the lead up to the elections because we maybe didn't scrutinize that Electoral Amendment Act enough. Maybe because people came out and made definite statements that electronic transmission will do X, Y, Z. So maybe we didn't really sit down and think that these people are so devious, and these people are so determined to rig this election, and they are so determined that our votes must not count, that they will still find a way to sneak in something somewhere.
But I don't think we are even wrong, because the thing about Nigeria is, in Nigeria, the law, we have obviously the constitution, we have the law is the law, but in Nigeria it's not really the same. In applying the law is something else, and we all know that. So, like, to back you up, the INEC chairman went to Chatham House, said what he said, and we all believed him.
Yeah. And
he was lying. That was what the law said.
He was lying.
Yeah, of course he was lying, but the law said what he was saying. He was saying that everything was going to go the way you said. Beavers, IREV, collation, everything properly done. You could see on your phone what's going on. That night, nothing was, the portal wasn't even working that night of the election. Nothing could be seen. So it's obvious that in Nigeria, the law is just an ass. People don't pay. Yes, the law might say A, but when it comes to application, anybody does what they want to do because you have power, because you have money. And that is why I believe that yes, the law might say what it says, and it's obvious that PTOB, yes, could have won based on what you said. But I don't see how Tinubu, who we all know is very ruthless, the people backing him, they are very ruthless. These people don't care about morality. They don't care about what you and I think, our love for Nigeria, what millions of young people want to say. They don't care. All they care about is money and power. And so I don't believe that those guys who are gonna sit back and say, you know what, let's just let P2B ride rush. Let's just let him win. No, it's not possible. I've come to study the enemy. I've come to read. I've come to understand. I've come to see that these guys are not just gonna let you just win. And going back to the point of strategy, this is why I believe that these guys are very good when it comes to strategy, because I don't think we young people are good at that.
Right.
They've planned this whole thing from the get-go. Yes, the law may say what the law says, but we all know that when it comes to the day of the election, if they share money, if they kill some people, things will go the way they want it to happen.
Right.
So for us to think that, I think it's a bit naive for people to hold out hope. Yes, you could hope that P2B could win in courts, but I think it's a bit naive to hope that something is going to happen. Something could happen, of course. This is life. Something could happen. P2B can win.
I don't think this is about hope per se.
Okay.
But as I said, there's a legal process ongoing. Until that process is completed, I refuse to speak about the election in past tense.
So what do you think about what do you think about P2B then? What do you think about P2B and the obedient movement? What do you think? What are your thoughts?
So I actually think the obedient movement is actually more important than Peter Obi himself.
Okay.
So I think Peter Obi was just the vessel. And for anyone who is perceptive enough and has been following Nigerian politics or Nigerian public space over the past 4 years, they'll have realized that what became the obedient movement first made itself known, I think, in 2020. What we now know as NSARS. That was actually I think it started before that, but that was when I personally first observed this thing, like this sort of decentralized leaderless movement that is moving in one definite direction. And there's no set of leaders that you can identify that this person is controlling, nothing like that. I think that was the first time we ever saw that in Nigeria's public space. And I think what that signifies to me is that there is a very large Nigerian youth population, which is not only just frustrated and tired, but which is also politically educated and active now. Now, the reason why I've described the support, even if they do what they want to do, they drag out this petition to the 29th so that this person is sworn in, and then they try and scatter everything. As I've mentioned earlier in another forum, that is a stay of execution and it's nothing more. Because what this election has proved is that I think when Peter Obi declared on the Labour Party platform, it was like 9 months to the election, wasn't it?
Yeah, around that,
So in the space of 9 months, you can take a candidate on the platform of a no-hoper party, a party that is going nowhere and has no hope of ever achieving anything at that level, right? In the space of 9 months, you can take a candidate on the platform of that party, and even according to the official figures, obviously we know Peter Obi won the election, but I'm even using the official INEC figures, that you can go from 0 to 6 million votes in 9 months. That's what this election has showed, that even with all the rigging, even with all the cutting of votes, with all the electoral fraud, with all the Mama Shukudi should not come out and vote, with all the if they born any Igbo, may I see them come vote for here, with all the Giavri's middle name is Chinedu, all that bullshit, with all the you look Igbo even though your name is Morayo, so you can't vote, all that. With all of that, somebody still got 6 million votes in an election with all of that. So basically, the people who, even if they succeed they do what they think is succeeding this time, it's just a stay of execution. Because those young people, yes, okay, 2 of us might be in the UK right now. How many Nigerians will ever get a UK visa?
My God.
They are not going anywhere. They are still there.
Of course, of course.
Except you want to literally kill all of them. Next time around, they are still going to be there.
Of course, yeah.
You understand? Even if they will come out and shout, say, "Well, I'm so disappointed. I'm never going to vote again." Blah blah blah. It's a lie. Next time around, next time we come, they will see they have an opportunity. More of them, including the ones who are old enough to vote now, or the ones who registered and couldn't get their PVCs this time around. More of them will join next time. Then what are you going to do? You'll be 4 years older. Those who would have died by then. The truth is that this thing is like, it's like a dam was built when a river was this wide. Now, the mouth of the river is still this wide, but the rest of the river has now widened by a factor of 3 or 4, and it's still the same dam that is there. So the water pressure is building. So yes, you can still close the dam, and you'll still be fine for now. But just give it time. So Peter Obi was the vessel, right? And you know what? It's called the obedience movement for now, as you know, homage to Peter Obi. But if Peter Obi is no longer in the picture, that movement is not going anywhere. It's still going to be there. It might change its name, might change its form, but already, I mean, there is every possibility. For example, who used to say that movement couldn't decide that it's going to coalesce into an actual political formation of its own? Who is to say that won't happen?
That's possible.
And if and when it happens, who is going to stop it? Because the issue I keep on raising, and one of the main reasons why I think the people who are in charge of Nigeria are not intelligent people at all, is that when you look at the population breakdown of Nigeria, what is by far the country's largest population?
The youths.
It's people under the age of 35.
Young people.
As in, it's not even close. The single largest demographic of Nigerians are under the age of 15. Now, do you know how young Nigeria is? So, for how long do you think you can keep this up?
No, you can't. It's
you
obvious,
really can't. So,
it's obvious.
The water pressure is building. That dam is going to burst. If I was one of those people in charge of Nigeria, the advice that I would have given my contemporaries is just gingerly open this dam. Let these young people have their way. Because it will be worse if you let them break it.
100%.
You know?
I agree. 100%.
I've said this several times. Nigeria is the world's most under-policed state relative to its size and population. Even if you send if you add military, police, every NSCDC, everybody holding a gun with a uniform in Nigeria, add them together. Maybe you get 500,000 men, maybe, if you're lucky. Nigeria has 180 plus million people. How many people do you want to kill? The day you drive that demographic into open revolt,
it's the end.
That day you will find out that even the people that you think you are going to use to shoot them, those people will turn those weapons around and shoot you instead.
Of course.
That's the reality.
Of course.
So, which is why when I see people like Tinubu playing these games now, you lost an election so scandalously, and then you still go and use Emilio Con and use money and force yourself in. Okay, good for you. People like me, so I'm not the one that they should be worried about, right? All I do is I write. I'm a journalist. I'm a writer. You know, I'm a public intellectual. I use words. You understand? In my life, I've never fired a gun. I don't know how to cock a pistol. I've never fired a gun before. It's not me you should be afraid of, right? I'm so harmless that when my life was threatened, I ran away. You understand? I left the country. I ran away. I went into exile. I obtained asylum protection. Got a different passport. I ran away. You understand? I'm not the dangerous one here. The dangerous people that these people should be worried about are the people that you don't see or hear from.
Millions.
They don't have 200,000 followers on Twitter. They don't talk plenty.
They're hungry, they're poor.
Do you understand?
Millions of them,
But the day that thing will snap, we have seen previews of this.
Yeah, of course. NSAS.
Even before NSAS, if you recall, in 2019, there was a riot in Lagos. People have forgotten this. When it was supposed to be a reprisal attack against South African businesses in Lagos. And it quickly turned into this free-for-all. And all of a sudden, because they started from targeting ShopRite and MTN and DSTV. By the end of that day, it had turned into anybody who has a car that looks like it was made after 2010. Anybody that looks like they are not suffering became a target. You understand? Because the people at those people at the bottom rung of the ladder, to them, $1 billion and 1 million naira are the same thing.
Of course.
Because they are both equally as out of reach. You understand? So to them, that is Emilokon, you have a helicopter, all of that. Man.
Yeah, I understand, and I agree with everything you said. But for me, one of the issues I think we have to balance, because we don't want violence in this disaster, but we don't want that. We want to balance out the fact that we will have a great Nigeria, but we don't want people to be killed. Because I think that burden or that sacrifice may be just too much for us. The question now becomes, how many people do you want to risk? How many people do you want to kill? 1 million? 2 million?
Does it matter what we want? Because what will happen regardless of what we feel about it.
But that's what we're talking about, and that's why we need to, because I think we need to balance this out. And this is why, yes, I understand the grievances in Nigeria. Of course, we all do. And I always tell my friends in Nigeria, wherever you are in the world, being Nigerian affects you. Whether you're in the UK like we are now, whether you're in the North Pole, in Canada, anywhere you are, just the fact you're a Nigerian, you're already at a disadvantaged position already. So it matters that a great Nigeria comes, because if Nigeria becomes better, then we don't need to be here. We can go back home and establish ourselves, going to business, going to politics, anything we want to do. But I think the balance we need to find is that, and we saw this in the Obedient movement, and I think this is one of the mistakes that they made, is that they weren't willing to accept other opinions or other views, other viewpoints. And this is one of the critiques I had.
Views being what exactly?
No, the point, so for example, you weren't allowed to criticize P2B. You just weren't allowed to. I did, and I know how they came for me. People like Sean Kuti did, people like Orino Mokri did. They came for them and they were very vicious. And I always tell them, to get political power is a different thing. Power acquisition is number one. Power consolidation is number two. Then you now execute power, that's number three. But for you to acquire power is a totally different ballgame altogether. You're looking at a country, like you rightly said, is very diverse. We have so many tribes. So you cannot just get power by saying you must support P2B or you're unpatriotic. You must support P2B or you don't love. You can't do that.
Question.
Okay.
Assuming the results of a free and fair election had been declared.
That was impossible before. All this happened before the election. That's my point.
I'm saying despite that all of this happened, what still happened on election day?
Tinubu won.
No, he didn't.
No, but legally, I mean,
INEC declared him winner. Did he win the votes on the ballot?
The fact is that Tinubu say won, and which is my point is that
all whether or not people went out yourself or went after Shehu
Kuti. I don't even matter. My point is
went
that
after what would that materially have changed?
No. What the point is that you're trying to convince me, right? Which is the point of politics is conversion. You're trying to convince
and it worked. They convinced enough people.
Not by saying you must, not by saying if you don't, we'll
but
call you names.
But did it work or not? Did they convince enough people or not?
Let me tell you what I did.
Because if you are saying they didn't convince enough people, then what you are saying is that Tinubu legitimately won that election.
I think those are two different arguments.
No, it's the same.
It is because if you did all these things you did as obedience, right? You called people out, you castigated them, you cursed them, you cursed their families, their kids.
Absolutely.
In some cases, you did that, you went to those extremes. And yet, who is the president-elect? Tinubu. So all these things you didn't work. You made a mockery of yourself. You lost friends. You lost family members.
So essentially,
you sacrifice all these things, and yet.
So essentially, the argument you have just made now is that, well, Tinubu was going to be the president anyway, so you might as well have not. That's not my argument.
My argument is that you can do both at the same time. You can be civil. You can accommodate. You can tell to your friends, I understand you don't support P2B. I understand you're a Baptist, so you're articulated. But can't you see these reasons with P2B?
Okay, so question. The people who died at Lekki Toll Plaza, for example, if you could bring them back from the dead right now, maybe they are still experiencing their death pangs, the pains they were feeling when they were dying, they were bleeding out, right? And you could put one of them in the studio right now, and then lecture him about this. Tell him, you know what? Instead of cursing this person or something, try and convince me.
Yeah. What I'm gonna say is this, right? There are better ways to do this, because when you castigate someone, right? You're not better off than Tinubu.
Everybody always has opinions about what's the better way.
No, but it's obvious that
it's
obvious that the obedience we are just No,
Which way
and
worked?
that's what I don't know, but my whole point
Because
is that
clearly
it
the
is
obedience
obvious.
way worked.
No, it didn't.
Because they won the damn election.
But it didn't. The whole point is it didn't, and that's my point. It didn't work.
How didn't it work? If they won the ballot,
but
that was the point of it, wasn't it?
Tinubu is gonna become a president. It didn't work.
That had nothing to do with whether they won the ballot or not.
You know why? Okay, why is it that after? Okay, look at how they attacked Shoyinka. They attacked,
or rather, how Shoyinka attacked them by calling them fascists.
When you act like this, what are you then? When you act, I don't mean all obedience. So let me be clear. I don't mean all obedience.
If you say Mama shouldn't come out and vote,
that's wrong. Of course, that's
what
wrong.
Is that?
That's being tribalistic. That's wrong.
No. Does that not fit the description of the term fascist?
Of course it is.
So Shoyinka did not see that as fascist.
No,
but it's people who are shouting on Twitter. Those are the ones who are fascists.
No, but the issue is the point.
And you don't see the obvious hypocrisy there.
No, David. The point is this, right? You're the new guy on the block, right? You're the new person.
Being the new person. No. So this is a very important point.
Let me say this, right? Let me say this. You're the new person. Your picture will be your this sense. You're this guy that wants to change Nigeria. The point is not to be a saint. Sorry. Okay, you're not the saint.
At all.
No, you're not the saint. You want to change Nigeria. You're the new guy. Everyone is coming for you, right? You cannot adopt the same tactics that the elites use. You can't do that. You're the different guy. You should be different.
My dear.
You don't need to castigate or curse. And
my
you
dear,
know why
this thing you've said, exactly the sort of thing I would have expected that Tinubu would say. You know why he would say it? You know why he would say it? You know why he would say it? He would say it precisely because it's the same reason why when we're growing up, the people who were giving us this instruction, who were actually bullies, they will tell you that the best way to deal with a bully is to keep quiet and walk away.
No, fight back by
just
all means.
Ignore them.
No, you can fight back. I fight back as well.
And if you ignore them, they will get tired and they'll leave you alone.
I fight back.
Which is absolute nonsense, because why would they stop?
No, fight back by all means, but don't fight back by cursing people's kids. Don't do that. That's wrong. You can't get me to support Obi
somebody
by cursing my kids. You can't do
children.
that.
Somebody shot children at the toll gate, but you draw the line at the other people causing that person's
No, that's not the point. You're bringing two different points.
That's the point. They are not different things.
No, the point I'm making is
because
obedience.
The reason this conversation frustrates me is that people often don't seem to be able to see the bigger picture.
We all see the bigger picture. We all want a great Nigeria. That's the bigger picture.
The big picture is that these the people who you think are just people who have polite disagreements and they don't deserve this vitriol that they are getting, the role that they are playing on behalf, whether they realize that they are playing that role or not, whether they are doing so intentionally or not, right? Whether people like Wole Soyinka are supporting Tinubu or not. But the fact is that by playing that role, right, they are helping the incumbents. That's the point. So if you are the challenger who is challenging an incumbent, I'm sorry to say, whether you like to hear this or not, the burden of morality is not with you. It does not rest with you. It lies with the incumbent.
But that's difficult then. But the issue then becomes
that's electoral democracy.
No, but the issue then is because, like I said, conversion. Okay, look at David.
That's electoral democracy.
We're disagreeing now, right? We're being respectful. We're being civil. Obedience.
If shot me, you will not be civil anymore.
Of course. I get your point.
If you put me through the things Buhari and APC put us through for 8 months, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you politely.
I understand your point, but to acquire power,
I don't carry bottle you for head now.
Again, to acquire power, you have to adopt a different. You can't do that to acquire power. You can't call out people's kids.
It's funny how you say this thing with so much confidence.
No, but it's obvious.
To acquire power,
but it's obvious. Who is our president-elect today? Tinubu is.
What does that have to do with who won the election?
Because you're trying to acquire something. You're trying to get something. I'm trying to get to become Nigeria's president, right? The game is this. What can I do to get to that position?
Win an election.
Yes,
which is exactly what they did.
But the issue is that he's not the president-elect.
So them being polite or not being polite has nothing to do with Mahmoud Yakubu coming out at 4 a.m.
But it didn't matter.
To fraudulently announce something that didn't exist.
No, but the point is it doesn't matter. He didn't win. Obi did not win. So all these things you guys did.
Obi won the election.
You lost your friends, right?
INEC did not announce him. What more could obedience have done?
David, you lost your friends. You lost family members, right? You've cost people.
I'm sure they don't regret it. Even the people I personally I don't regret it.
No, that's
I absolutely do not.
So people that cause mockeries, daughter, for example, they shouldn't regret it. They shouldn't regret calling us an innocent 2-year-old or 3, however old she is.
Well, and the things Omokri did, what then?
What did he do? What did Omokri do?
He took part in some of those tribal online lynchings as well. Several times he did.
No, but did
he absolutely did?
Okay.
First of all,
okay.
And ethnic group you come from was one of his favorite targets, by the way.
I agree, and
you know,
yeah, I agree, and I see that argument. But my point is, you don't need to curse people's kids. You don't need to call people names. You don't need to bully them, which is what obedience.
Well, we're going to have to agree to disagree.
They did that to me, so I know firsthand. And for me, I'm like, you know what you do, right? For me, I'm like, you know what? I told my friends, when it comes to this OB issue, I will leave it alone.
Which probably
I was trying to call out, what I was trying to do was I was trying to point them to some issues which later happened. I told them, look at this, you can do. Don't do this, but because you're not bullying me, I'm like, you know what? Who even wants to be cousins? Who even wants to be called names? Who even wants? I'm like, you know what? Let me just stand back and do my thing.
Well, clearly,
and even what happened?
Clearly, you don't want. Clearly, you don't want to be involved in Nigerian politics.
No, I want to, but I'm like, no, I want to, but at some point, I'm like, no, don't get me. I'm tough. I'm like, I can't be dealing with you guys, and I'm just.
If your reaction to all of that is Tinubu won, good for you.
No, not good for me. No,
that's pretty much what you just said.
No, not good for me. My point is this, right? My point is this.
And by the way, Tinubu did not win that election. So, like, you keep on repeating that thing, and it's not going to fly by me. But that Tinubu did not win that election.
You're so funny.
Mahmoud Yakubu came out at 4 a.m. and made an announcement. That's good for him, and that's
what
good
you
for
and
Tinubu.
I think don't matter. What matters is that president-elect is Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
The data.
That's what matters.
The data does not support that idea.
But those ones are. We all know how Nigeria works. No, what matters is that come May 29th,
I'm saying the point is
Tinubu
that
will become president.
the entire point of the campaign was not to get Mahmoud Yakubu to say this or that. The entire point of the campaign was to win on the scoreboard, which is what we did. That's exactly what we did.
David, right? 10 years from now, when we all die, God willing, good old age, and we're all gone, who will our kids remember us who won the election 2-3 months ago? Who would they remember us who won? Tinubu.
They will remember who won the election as Peter Obi. They remember who was declared winner as Bola Tinubu.
Sir, the people that write history are the victors. The victors that will write the history of Nigerian politics.
Well, people like me are still going to be here. We're also going to write too. There is no longer any monopoly of writing. You know?
The whole point is that when you type in who was Nigeria's president on Google from 2023 to whatever, what will come out is Tinubu?
Good for him.
Exactly, but that's the point you're making.
For all of the 5 minutes that he'll be president, if he's president, so good for him.
Even if he's not there, Shetima will. But the whole point I'm making is obedience. You guys want to win, so perhaps, and this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to say this right. Hopefully, this election will teach them a lesson. Not even them, us as well, because I really love what PTOB is doing to make us understand that there are different vehicles to get to what we want, which is a great Nigeria. We can do it by being civil. We can disagree respectfully. Disagree. We don't need to call people names and cause them, and we don't need to disagree. Because when you do that, you're not converting me.
Good. It's not everybody that needs to be converted.
But you need us. You need people to vote for your guy.
Clearly, we didn't.
But it doesn't matter.
Clearly, we didn't.
Don't win. It doesn't matter
because we won it without you.
No, but it doesn't. But he doesn't. Oh, so David, you guys are so funny, man. You guys are so funny because I don't see why, if you wanna get what you want, why can't you just conform or try to, maybe compromise or try to adopt a different tactic? I don't see why you can't.
This is the exact same argument that is always made in America. For example, when there's a mass shooting, there's a school shooting, and then in the aftermath of the shooting, people come out and start shouting they should enable introduce gun control, stricter legislation, blah 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 blah, and some other people then say, no, you are politicizing the issue. This is not the right time, and you're not being civil about this. We have that people are still mourning. Why are you trying to use this time to drive a political agenda and blah blah blah? Or when a black person gets murdered by police in the States, and then maybe a group of black people in the person's community then go out and start protesting or something, and then the usual suspects then come out and say, no, this is not how you register your grievance. Why are you burning down Walmart? This has nothing to do with the protest, blah, blah, blah. You're not being civil, and you're making it difficult for us to understand your point of view by being so abusive all the time. And the point is that, when will it ever be the right time? When will there ever be the right vehicle for expressing grievance? Because at the end of the day, the point is an election between an incumbent and the challenger is always going to be a referendum on the incumbent.
Of course, yeah.
That's the issue.
Yeah,
so the point of this election wasn't even we love Peter Obi. No, the point of this election was a rejection of the established order. It was a grievance vote.
Yeah, but you can do both.
So where there is a grievance that is being expressed, you cannot then dictate to people that somebody has beaten them. You now tell them how they should cry. No, that's not how it works.
No, but for me, right? For me, one thing I observed with obedience was that you couldn't critique Obi. Obi became like this saint or this god that if you dare to even call out which there are so many things that Obi did that were wrong.
But the thing is,
so many. When you couldn't even bring them up.
The three contenders.
You couldn't bring those.
Technically four. Yeah. Well, the four contenders.
Yeah.
So 3 contenders. So it was Obi, it was Atiku, it was Tinubu.
Yeah.
So when the person that you want to criticize is up against somebody who has a federal conviction for who has a federal indictment for corrupt practices and someone who has a federal conviction for heroin trafficking. And then we are now leaving those two to go and say Obi said this, Obi did not say that, Obi built this school, did not, or he saved to, or he put money inside this company, dude. Like, it's like the hypocrisy is off the scale. No, it's not hypocrisy. There's a log.
You can do both.
There's a log inside people's eyes.
David, you can
and
do
they say,
both.
No. We want to focus on this toothpick.
But David, you can do both. You can criticize Tinubu, Atiku, and Obi, and still vote for Obi. You can do that.
I completely beg to disagree.
No,
because the scale of reference.
No, but surely
is not, like, there is no scale of reference.
No, but surely there are some things you don't like with Obi that you can call out. Surely there are so many things that you can
Why
say.
is it so important to call it out when
the other
two alternatives are so much
So let me give
worse.
an example, right? I believe that Obi was a mediocre governor. I believe he didn't do well. You know what that does to Peter Obi when he becomes president? He will strive to do excellence for Nigeria.
So by expressing that during the what function? What function does that serve?
I want to be when he becomes. I want him to know, sir. Listen, you didn't do well as governor of Anambra State. The roads that you built.
Why can that criticism not wait until after the election?
But why should it? Sir, you're trying to become my president. I need to assess you. I need to convince me that when you become president, you're gonna do better. But when you believe as Obi, you're this god or this saint that you did well. You know what are you gonna do when you become president? You're gonna do the same thing again.
So I want you to know Peter Obi that expressing. But the point is that whether Peter Obi is going to convince you or is not going to convince you. Yeah. That's not going to happen at that point.
No, but that's what he's trying to do. You're campaigning to convince me. You're campaigning. The point of campaigning is you're trying to convince me and Nigerians to vote for. That's the whole point of campaigning.
Within about 5 minutes of knowing who all the contestants were, everybody who was going to vote already knew who they were going to vote for.
No, but
there was nothing like this person is going to convince me.
No, but
let Obi convince me. Let's be serious.
But that's what campaigns are for. You're campaigning.
That's ideally what campaigns are for. But when you have a human being campaigning against an animal.
But if you're a newcomer, you're trying to convince me you're gonna make Nigeria great, right? Tell me how you're gonna do it,
my dear.
No, I don't just want to believe that you're gonna do it. Tell me, sir. Convince me.
I think I've been in the UK for a very long time.
I was in Nigeria last year, so I know this is.
I think you think that this is an election between what's his name? What's the former Labour leader? Jeremy Corbyn and Theresa May. Two human beings who have something upstairs, who are well educated, and who have some base level of respectability and integrity. I think that's what you've mistaken this for.
No,
because this past Nigerian election, my dear, it was not that. This past Nigerian election was literally an election between a human being of some description. Now, whether or not you want to say this is a premium human being or this is somebody who lives in the gutter, a human being of some description and a tadpole.
Yeah.
So when it's literally a 50-50 choice between a human being and a tadpole, to be honest, I'm not really interested in hearing that this human being was a mediocre governor in 2005. So that's not really my concern. Because if this person is a mediocre governor, so therefore that means let me see what this other person has to say. Let me see whether this person can convince me. Why? This is a tadpole. It's not a human being. I disagree. I don't respect the candidacy of Bola Ahmed Tinubu. I don't respect it enough.
It doesn't mean that you can't call out Peter Obi. Okay, let me ask you this question, sir, David. Tell me one thing you don't like about Peter Obi.
I don't like the fact that he. I might get into trouble for saying this, but I actually quite dislike the fact that he doesn't. Sometimes he wants to sort of avoid offending people.
Acquiesce and yeah. I agree.
So he knows very well that he has a very energized movement behind him, but at the same time, the political establishment doesn't want to upset them too.
And we agree. And this is one thing I don't like.
So,
yeah, exactly.
For example, I think it was. I'm not able to mention the Wole Soyinka thing because, I think that has been overflogged. Even before then, during the actual electoral campaigns, I remember there was a time when these people tried to create some kind of non-existent scandal surrounding. I think one of his independent support groups went and printed his picture on a prayer mat.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that. Yeah.
Or it was even an APC group printed his picture on a prayer mat.
Yeah, I saw that.
And they put it on the internet to make it look as if Peter Obi's people are disrespecting Islam.
Yeah.
Right? And what I would have done in that situation is that I would simply have said, this has nothing to do with me. I didn't authorize this. And I suspect that this came from the APC camp. This is what you people do. I left it at that. Instead, he started doing shalaye. And he basically ended up apologizing. I'm like, why are you apologizing for what you didn't do? Because by apologizing, you are giving them something to. Because the minute you apologize, they won't let it go.
Yeah,
they will even now double down and create a whole edifice of nonsense on top of it, because that's what they excel at doing. Creating edifices of nonsense out of straw man that they built. So as far as I'm concerned, don't even acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Or if you have to acknowledge it, tell them to fuck off.
Yeah.
That's personally what I would do.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've spoken to the man a couple of times, and he strikes me very much as, and to be honest, that's probably the reason why he's a lot more successful than I am. He's a lot more successful at managing people.
Yeah, but the issue with that is, let me just add to that. When you call Tinubu and Atiku your elder brothers, for me, that one was a no-no for me as well.
That's him being a politician.
Nah, but
I personally wouldn't have done that.
Exactly, that's my point. That's my point.
That.
And you could see that he has changed now. He doesn't call them his brothers anymore.
I personally would have done
that. Your brothers, they won't see the election from you.
It's something I even said it on Twitter. I don't like the few times I've spoken to him. It's just been sort of, I don't like sort of giving him political advice or anything. I mean, he's 10 times politician I'll ever be. So I don't like sort of straying too far outside of my field of knowledge. But I think I've said this on Twitter a couple of times that, look, you have a support base, which is overwhelmingly young, which is very energized. And it's not something to be ashamed of. Lean into it. Yeah. And the reason is, if that was Bola Tinubu, who had a support base that was actually organic, he wasn't spending money to make these people pretend to support him, that these people actually supported him because they wanted to, like this person meant that much to them. If that was Tinubu, I mean, throughout the campaign, did you ever see Tinubu apologize for anything, even once?
No.
I can't remember. Tinubu's entire campaign was built on dishonesty, violence, and vote buying. It's my tone, and intimidating people. This entire campaign, how many times did you see videos of them going around beating people up around Lagos? He never came out for one day to apologize or to even just call for calm or anything like. In fact, he was the very last candidate to sign the peace accord. For many months, he refused to sign it. And nothing happened. The sky didn't fall down. So I just feel as if that's who you're up against.
I think he's learned his lessons, though.
Why are you?
I think he's learned now.
And this boils down to the previous points I was trying to make with you. Like, the new guy on the block, I fundamentally disagree with the idea that person should be held to higher, some non-existent standard of behavior compared to what is already on ground. I agree he should be held to a higher standard of behavior. But when the current standard, the Tinubu standard is on the floor.
Yeah, pig right? level.
Now, this guy is on the table. You're now saying no. Why is it not on the ceiling? I have a problem with that.
So your opinion, anything that the new guy can do to get power, do it and get power.
If the new guy is demonstrably better than the old guy and will be demonstrably an upgrade on the old guy, I don't see why not, to be honest, because that's the reality of Nigerian politics. Yeah. What I've seen in the short time that I've been around is that the people who come back, I've seen this with Pat who told me, Prof Pat is he's like my mentor, right? And he has been involved in politics too.
Of course, yeah.
This has happened to him multiple times since so in 1999 when democracy came back and he didn't run for election in Delta State because all of them were still skeptical. So they allowed the criminals to run first. And then
Ibori-
by
Ibori
2003,
and co, yeah.
by 2003, they all realized their mistake and they all tried to run, and those people
gone,
had already
yeah.
locked them
It's
out,
over, yeah.
right? And the multiple times that he has run for governor, he has run for president, the multiple times he has tried to enter the political space, he has faced the same issue. The part you told me of Lagos Business School, of the bank board, this very respectable gentleman who, you understand, like, Prof. Pat is literally one of the straightest men in the world. Like, this, he's like a ruler. You understand? Like, he's one of those people that, you know, when you're crossing the road, like, maybe you've pushed that button and the light hasn't turned, the man hasn't turned green yet, but there's no traffic coming. Most people will just cross. Prof. Pat is the kind of person who will wait, even if there's no car come until it turns green. Then he'll cross. Very straight-laced guy this. And every time he has tried to venture into politics using that vision that I am holding myself to this stratospheric standard of behavior. You understand? So all the PDP and APC people around him, the candidates he's competing against, those ones are just pumping money into everything, buying voters, by even his own, the parties he used to run under, his own, what's it called? His own polling agents. They will buy his own polling agents.
You understand? As well,
And he'll be like, you know what? I don't expect you to work for me because of money. I expect you to work for me because you believe in my candidate. He'll be speaking English to them. Meanwhile, everything he's saying is just, you understand? Because that's how Nigeria is. So every single time he would venture into politics, he would get comprehensively trounced because he's holding himself to an impossible standard. I believe that when you are up against some of these people, no matter how much better than them you think you are, right? You have to enter some rogodinho with them.
This is Machiavelli now.
Yeah. You have to be ready to enter somewhat. It doesn't mean that you want to kill people like they do.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you commit crimes like they do. But so if you're on a Twitter space last night, I think what's his name, Honorable Tony Nwulu, he was on that space with me, where he discussed how he was able to get the not too young to run bill passed. And I'm quoting him, I'm paraphrasing what he said, but he said there was basically a certain measure of blackmail involved because he was the one pushing the bill. He's obviously, his colleagues in the House didn't want anything to do with that bill. You know, anything that involves youth participation, they want nothing to do with it. And he was able to get through to the speaker, and the speaker had already told him, look, you're a first-time representative, first-time reps never get any major constitutional amendment passed. So my dear, rest. It's not happening. And he basically blackmailed the guy that, you know, this thing that happened a while back in London, you know, I have a video of this thing. The person that was involved sent me the video. I have it on my phone. And I didn't put this video out to anybody. You know, I kept it because I respect you, blah, blah, blah. And essentially, the thrust of what he was saying was, if you don't help me push this thing, I'll go release your fuck up for public. You understand? And it worked. And then the second layer of the blackmail, quote unquote, he was able to interface with people on social media and in the media space to put out the phone numbers of all the reps in the House, especially the ones who had indicated that they didn't want this bill to pass. And overnight, there was this huge text message and calling campaign. Their constantly started calling them, cursing them, threatening their families. Some even called their wives to threaten them to, like, if you don't pass this bill, you understand, we'll kill you, that kind of thing. Like, obviously, that's extreme. But guess what? The bill passed. And it worked. So if the trade-off of having such a positive piece of legislation pass was that a few people got to be upset in the process, I say, well, you know, they should go fuck themselves.
The difference is that one worked, this one did not work. That's the difference.
Well, that's
where we are.
According to Mahmoud.
Do you think as a journalist that you should be supporting P2B?
Well, the truth is that everyone, whether journalist or not, has a political preference. And I think the most honorable thing to do is to declare your position up front. Because I think what a lot of journalists, particularly in Nigeria, do, which I find abhorrent, is that they pretend that they are an abstraction. They're above it all. They are not part of the political space. You know, they're just these impartial commentators. Meanwhile, of course, they have their own bias.
100%.
You know, and everything they are doing is biased in a certain direction. You understand? But you are not declaring your bias, so you are pretending to be what you are not. I think that's a very scummy thing to do. So I would rather tell you that, look, the one thing I'll never do is lie on behalf of Peter Obi, because obviously, as a journalist, the minute I tell a lie, I've lost my credibility and I've lost my career.
Yeah.
Right? I'll never tell a lie. I'll never distort the truth. I'll never tell a half truth for the sake of Peter Obi. However, I would declare my bias up front that this is the person I would prefer to win this election. And this is also the person that if all else fails, I don't want this person anywhere near. I will even hold my nose and manage Atiku instead of this person. I think that's the honest thing to do.
I agree, but don't you think that may preclude you or stop you from criticizing him and writing articles not against him really, or saying things that you
So, I mean, part of the reason why I even have a level of support for him in the first place was because after doing some, level of research into all the 3 major candidates or the 4 major candidates, assuming you include Kwankwaso in there, it becomes very clear that this is the one who, if you are going to write criticism of Peter Obi, you're going to end up writing one very intellectual, highfalutin stuff.
I don't think so, though.
I don't think I mean by that is that you're not going to be writing, Peter Obi sold drugs in Chicago.
Yeah, but there's some things that you can. There's some things that you let me give you an example.
Peter Obi inflated contract.
Let me give you an example. Let me give you an example. Right, when Peter Obi was governor, I've said this publicly, so I'm not scared to say this here. When he was governor of Anambra State, the bodies of about 50 young men were found in a river in Anambra State. One question that could be asked, you could say that, well, that's SARS. Peter Obi had nothing to do with SARS. My pushback to you will be that as governor of Anambra State, you have something to do with SARS. SARS operates under you. Yes, of course, constitutionally, it's
federal
police and the federal, but you can't tell me that you didn't know. Did you conduct an investigation when it happened? Did you hold a press conference? What's the guy's name that does all these documentaries? He's quite big on social media. Did a documentary about this same killing as well. You could see the sister of one of those boys. She had to sleep with the police officer, one of those SARS guys, for something, just to know where her brother was or something of that nature. I'm getting this wrong, but the point was she had to not sell her body, she had to give her body just to find out her brother's whereabouts. And then eventually the brother was found dead. And as governor of Anambra State, I know when that happened. I was in Anambra when that happened. It was big news. From Peter Obi, nothing. Quiet meets. And up to today, I always ask myself, why? 50 young men dead in a river. Yes, of course, we all know it's SARS or Kozo. I've been to SARS or Kozo myself. I know, I've met James Wanfo. But as governor, you can't tell me that you didn't know. It's either you didn't know, which in that case, I'm sorry, you have to know. That's your job as governor. Number 2 is that you gave the order. I don't think you did. You can't tell. You could. I don't think Peter Obi will tell SARS to go and kill 50 young men. But the point I'm making is the initial point, which is that perhaps he didn't know, which is wrong. You have to know. And so for me, that is something that you can write about, which is a big story. That the LP presidential candidate, this man that claims to be the new guy, when he was governor of Anambra State, bodies were found in a river, floating on a river. It was big news in Anambra State.
So yeah, you could.
And and when this last election, nobody talked about it. It was quiet.
You could write about that, but the issue that is, it's tangential.
No, but it's just like saying Wike. Okay, look at Wike now, for example. Look at what Wike is doing. Just like saying that what is happening in River, say Wike has nothing to do with it. Of course he does.
Because Wike was directly involved in the electionary process.
But I don't mean the election. I mean as per telling police officers to go and arrest somebody or go and close somebody's shop, which was what Wike was doing, right? Or what we heard that Wike was doing. So we could make the claim that Peter Obi told SARS to go and do this, because we don't know whether Peter Obi did or did he didn't. We don't know. He's not come out to say that whether he did or. But again, my point is that
I can understand why a story like that could be written.
Yeah.
But if you read the kind of work I do,
I don't mean you, but I mean
the only type of work that I put out is what I can prove with receipts.
No, but the receipts, they can go on Google and browse 50 young men.
What I mean by receipts is something that would
guy's documentary. That guy's documentary.
No,
can speak
that's
to the
not what
family
I mean by
members.
receipts. I mean something that would directly and comprehensively.
You didn't mortuary. What did you do? Okay, so that will link it to Peter. Okay, I get your point. Sorry, I get your point. Yeah.
So otherwise, it's tangential.
Okay, yeah, I get it. But my point was just by declaring for Peter Obi, that's and maybe not you, but other journalists, when you declare for a candidate, whether you openly or not openly, that precludes you from seeing or publicizing this or even asking this question. That's my point. I don't know if you get, if you get what I mean.
Yes, and it is a good point.
Yeah.
It is a good point. It's potentially it could be an issue, especially if the journalist believes that, well, this is the best candidate, so let's not even waste my energy going after this person. It is an issue. Yeah. And my pushback to that will then be that it's then the job of other journalists who have opposing preferences to do that. So I think you will find that anywhere in the world, there's no such thing as an all-in-one journalist and all-in-one press establishment. Every press establishment always has its own bias or its own niche. So you are more likely to see, in the US, for example, you are likely to see NBC, CNN focus on Republican scandals. And you're more likely to see Fox News focus on Democrat scandals. They balance each other. So that's what it's supposed to be. So if someone like me, if I'm going after Tinubu, I'm sure there are several journalists who are even on Tinubu's payroll.
Of course,
who could have gone after Peter Obi.
Tinubu owns now TVC,
and The Nation. They could have gone after Peter Obi. They could have, this story that you've just mentioned, they could have done something with it. They didn't.
And I think that's balancing, that tit for tat will help our conversation and help Nigeria, because that will tell people to be, listen, when you become president, you need to know this. You can't just say, oh, I don't know what SSS is doing.
I agree.
So, but moving on, when it comes to El-Rufai, who I know you've written about a lot, I know we just have a little
8 minutes.
Yeah. Let me just to conclude, right? When it comes to El-Rufai, what do you think about El-Rufai? Just short version, really.
I could spend an hour talking about what I think about El-Rufai. I mean, if you know what I think about El-Rufai, you should go watch the documentary which I published on my West Africa Weekly channel in December. It was called Southern Kaduna, Blood, Tears, Anger. That documentary will basically give you all the answers that you need about who and what Nasir El-Rufai is. Nasir El-Rufai, the reason I think of him as a specifically such a dangerous person is not just the fact that sorry, give me a sec. It's not just the fact of his complicity or his involvement in the genocidal violence in Southern Kaduna, or the fact that a personal friend of mine, Ibanga Isine, is also a journalist, was forced to flee Nigeria. He was forced to leave his family and flee the country because he wrote a 4-part story about the killings in Southern Kaduna, and in the space of 4 days, 6 of his 7 sources dropped dead, one after the other, and an attempt was made on his own life, and he had to run away from the country, and it's currently under protection. Wow. You know, so there are so many issues for the reasons why another friend of mine, Stephen Kefas, also had to flee the country because of Nasir El-Rufai. You know, and before I fled the country, I already had run-ins with this fellow. One of the things that I did when I was part of the research team that put together the Silent Slaughter report in 2019 was we went to Kaduna State. Kaduna was where much of the report focused on. I went to a place called Kajuru in the aftermath of one of these attacks, and we documented the first time in my life I ever smelled what burning human flesh smells like. It's an absolutely revolting smell. Wow. Right, it doesn't Kajuru. The first time I saw what the corpse of a child looks like, that was in Kajuru. So that's what I think about Nasir El-Rufai. So, but the reason I especially think of him as such a dangerous person, in addition to all of that, is that he's one of the few public officials in Nigeria who is also able to cover his brutality and his animal nature with a veneer of intellectualism. So he knows how to, he sponsors book fairs. He's the patron to a lot of supposed public intellectuals. He endows a scholarship at Oxford here, St. Andrew's College at the University of Oxford, £92,000 a year. He has a seat on the International Advisory Board at the African Studies Center at the University of Oxford. You know, this thing called, so if you're familiar with how the Saudi and Qatari royal families use sports to do this thing called sport washing. You could call this book washing, right? It's basically academic, what's the term for it now? reputation management, or there's a specific term for it. It's not influence peddling. There's a term for it. I forget the name. Image laundering. Yeah, that's the term. That's so he's one of the few people who actually knows how to do these things. He has these connections. So the civil society organizations, El-Rufai is deeply embedded in a lot of them. I remember I did a story last year about Amnesty International Nigeria and how the former media officer, Issa Sanusi, was an El-Rufai operative inside Amnesty International. So something would happen to you. Maybe your community was attacked by these killer herdsmen in southern Kaduna. You'd get interviewed by a researcher at Amnesty International. And then this media officer at Amnesty International would try and get access to the researchers' information because they work in the same office, and potentially pass this across to El-Rufai. So he knows things he shouldn't know. He has access to information other people don't have access to. He's a genuinely dangerous person. So, unlike someone like Wike, who is just a thug. Wike is not an intelligent man, just a thug. All he has is just violence. That's it. Take that away from him, he has nothing. El-Rufai is also a thug, but in addition to being a thug, he's an intelligent thug. So that makes him a lot more dangerous. He's every bit the animal that Wike is, but he also has all the brains that Wike does not have. That's what makes him so dangerous. He has cleverly insinuated himself into so many different aspects of respectable Nigerian life. He has a daughter or a niece who is now a partner at PwC.
Wow.
Their what's it called? Advisory arm. She's a partner there. Probably this person is not probably the most qualified person to be partner, but guess what? Every single advisory contract from Kaduna State government goes to PwC. So she's bringing in the business. So she becomes partner. From there, because she has this sort of profile that has been built artificially, she can say, I'm a partner at PwC. The next thing is go into government, become some DG or some chairperson, become something, you understand? And that's how you build and consolidate power that you shouldn't have.
Yeah.
So that's why El-Rufai is such a specifically dangerous person. It's not just for the fact that he goes after people and gets people killed. It's also the fact that even the internationals, look what happened to me. In February, they tried to light me on fire here. They came, till today, they are still, if you go around Twitter and Facebook, you still see sponsored posts with my name on it saying they expelled from Oxford, blah, blah, blah. I never even had anything to do with Oxford. My fellowship was at Cambridge. Yeah. But because I had a book launch at Oxford, these people went and he's embedded at Oxford. Yeah. They went and activated their assets there. People that he has financial relationships with there, like Prof. Miles Larmer at the African Studies Center, was the one who was front and center of this effort to blacken my name. And then, Onyeka and Wele, we pour him, he became the collateral damage in all of this. Because I was the actual target there, not Onyeka. It was actually me that was the target. And he was the collateral damage who ended up getting his reputation in the UK destroyed for absolutely nothing, right? And, even though what they were trying to do didn't really work, they were trying to portray me in a manner that wasn't true. This man went to the extent of till today, there's a running battle on my Wikipedia page. My Wikipedia page has been locked, but there's still a running battle with people argue, so for example, the claim that I was kicked out of Cambridge, for example, it's on my Wikipedia page till today. No such thing happened. I was never kicked out of Cambridge. I completed my fellowship, but it still says my Wikipedia page that I was kicked out of Cambridge. And because I've gone through the edits, some people have contested it, and then there's this one editor who I obviously was working on that payroll because there's no other reason for it to be so committed to this thing.
Yeah, of course.
Who keeps insisting that no, this thing was reported in one student blog at Oxford, so therefore that makes it true. So that's the extent to which these people are willing to go, and that's why they are such a nightmare. Yeah.
No, thank you. Honestly, David, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. Where can someone get your Substack, right?
Yes, so that's westafricaweekly.substack.com.
Yeah, I'm also going to put this book, The Jungle. You talked about Onyeka. Onyeka helped to publish it as well. It's a very good
Baby Man Publishing.
Yeah. It's a powerful book. I think it goes into everything that we didn't go into in this.
Exactly.
And I believe that we'll probably do this again if you want.
Exactly. And for the benefit of the audience, the book is available if you are Outside Nigeria, it's available on Amazon, amazon.co.uk. If you are in Nigeria, it's available on Roving Heights.
Yeah.
Books.
David, thank you so much. It's an honor. You're a good friend of mine. You do incredible work, and hopefully people are going to support you and read what you write. And all we want is the better Nigeria. That's what we want. Whether we do it through ABC.
Exactly.
So any vehicle that we take
There
us
are many
there,
ways to kill a cat.
Exactly. Any vehicle that will take us there, we'll do it. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful.
All right.
Thank you
for me.
Thank you.